I'm Nick Von Walkerbarth, and you're listening to the VonDubCast. If you don't want to listen to me gap in the intro and you want to skip right to the interview, skip about 10 minutes. But before you do, please consider doing one of these couple things that really helps out the show. Following the social medias for the VonDubCast, subscribing, and leaving a review. If you could do those things, that'd be awesome. Also, give me a subscription on the YouTube channel. That'd be great too. All right, welcome everybody to episode number 75 of the VonDubCast. Once again, going out of order of the recording order. I have probably a couple more episodes that I recorded further back, but sometimes episodes like this with my buddy Cole. Cole is a immunology student. If you don't know what immunology is, it's kind of the study of the immune system, and that kind of takes the whole gambit of, vaccines, allergies, certain arthritises, work off of the immune system. There's so much just inflammation and what a key role it has in the body and how tied into the immune system that is. It's one of the most important topics of study that you can do, and it's so admirable, and I love it. I mean, I remember when my sister took her first couple immunology classes in university. She was a specialized science major, I think, and it was very eye-opening. Even some of the stuff that she was teaching me got me kind of interested in it, and it's always been a subject that I've held close to my heart. To be honest with you guys, I couldn't even remember what major Cole was in, and it just happened to be immunology and the conversation we were able to have surrounding COVID. Because kind of where I was going with that is just what an important thing immunology is all the time, but during a pandemic really ramps it up. Apologies if you guys can hear my neighbor mowing his lawn. It just started as soon as I started recording this. He started his lawnmower, so we're dealing with that. But yeah, so it was an awesome conversation. Definitely. You can see the different knowledge bases, mine coming from podcasts and individuals that are bravely putting out data and information, and Cole's kind of from being within academia and working on the project from his side. We definitely have different information. And what I loved about this podcast was we were able to discuss it in a friendly way and both change our positions. He changed my mind and made me sharpen up a lot of my arguments and really, kept me to task. And I think I did that to him, and made sure that he was taking in some of the orthodoxy from outside of academia and looking at things through a different lens of maybe someone from an outside perspective. And I really think it brought us both to a better point of understanding at the end of it. And I think that's the whole goal of discussions like this, and why, like I argue in this podcast, why I think it's so dangerous that the discussion is being shut down around this. Because you can't do this, and you can't bring people's positions closer to a medium point and more educated, because you're just supposed to take this line of what is okay and the standard information, and that's the only thing that can be discussed. And that is very dangerous. And that's what allows things like we saw. So the day after I recorded this interview, Bret Weinstein had another two doctors on, one doctor and one kind of entrepreneur that's researching vaccine reactions, and is investigating why there seems to be a preponderance of evidence that is being kept in-house with the makers of the vaccines and these regulatory outlets of real dangers with these vaccines. Not to say that, not the dangers that everyone's blowing it up in the conspiracy theory, but you can see that there's things that need to be addressed and things that need to be talked about, and people need to be made aware of in their decision making for vaccines. I've said it a million times on this podcast. I was saying, I think I said, if you're over 25 and you're not in really good shape and really healthy and taking all your vitamins and stuff, I would say to get vaccinated, right? If you're under 25, yeah, it's up to you. Do your own research, research the disease and see what kind of risks you think you're taking, and research the vaccines and see what kind of risks you're taking. But when I was saying that, I was under the understanding that, off the public data, the vaccines, that they're pretty safe. All the doctors recommend it. But now what happens when you hold down discussion is now there is evidence that's coming up and we're not discussing it. There's obviously going to be adverse reactions, and that's just part of any rollout that you have with any medical technology, but you need to be able to have open discussions around them so that these risks can be accurately weighed. And also there's everything with ivermectin and how they're blocking these, very safe prophylactic drugs that could have had this pandemic licked 6 months ago, and they're blocking it. Right. But what I'm trying to say is I didn't have all of this information when I had this conversation with Cole. I did my best with the information I had, and that's why I'm releasing this, probably a couple of weeks earlier than it would have normally, because information's coming out so rapidly. And I think I've already had so many people come up to me and kind of, give me shit for spreading, they are calling it conspiracy theories, but it's not. It's real doctors. They're discussing it. I don't know how nobody that's actually watched the video has come up to me arguing, but a ton of people that haven't have come up and argued. And and that's fine. Everyone's entitled to their opinion, but I just keep telling people, just watch it, just give it a chance. I'm not the type of guy that shares things willy-nilly. I hope if you listen to any of these episodes, you can tell that if you trust me even the slightest bit, that, or what is I'm trying to find the right terminology for it. Like, if you can trust in my intellectual abilities to any point, that I wouldn't just be duped by some swindlers, right? That I'm actually going to back these things up and use my, I'm skeptical of everybody and everything that everyone says, right? Not just left, not just right. I'm skeptical of what everybody says because everyone has ulterior motives, and I'm always trying to go off of actions. And I really think that there's a lot of truth to this. I'm not saying it's all going to come out and be true, and but I think a lot of this is going to come out. And I think the earlier you can get on it and the more lives that we can save and the more we can change this narrative and open up discussion and really put the spotlight on people that are holding it down right now. I mean, YouTube just pulled down that conversation with Bret Weinstein, right? Just like they took down the Unity 2020 page on Twitter when it started to go against the narrative, right? Like it's very upsetting to see. And I think companies like YouTube and Facebook are just putting a big target on their back once all this comes out and they find out that they were complicit in the blood on their hands by blocking these things and this information, and blocking discussion is the main point around it. Whether it is or whether it isn't, that's so far beyond the point. It's just about that there needs to be open discussions so that people can make these decisions for themselves and not just be spoon-fed narratives that they are forced to take on at risk of, public shame and all these other things. It's just very scary. So yeah, but like I said, this conversation happened before that. It was very polite. I think I learned a lot. Cole, I hope you learned a lot. I can't speak for Cole, but I think it was really great. If you want to check out what Cole has to say on a couple other topics, he has a YouTube page called Investigate, Explore, Discover. I should have a link to it in the description here. He takes scientific papers that are interesting to him. I think he did one on vaping. He's done one on a couple other things, and just breaks it down, tries to put it in more plain English, maybe throw a little bit of humor in it, and make it so instead of, trying to bang your head against a wall for an hour reading a scientific paper, you can actually get the gist of what it's saying and the important information, what is actionable, in a more entertaining fashion on YouTube. So go check him out. I know there's a lot of work that goes into it. I've seen with trying to do a YouTube page just exactly what goes into it lately. And it is tough. Just carrying on off that fact, I know I've been saying in every freaking intro for how long that I'm going to get the YouTube page caught up. I have an amazing guy, funnily enough, also named Cole, who is helping me get the YouTube page back caught up. I think we've gotten 5 episodes up now. I think we're stuck on 48 for about 3 months, and now we've got 49 all the way up to 54, I think, up now, and more coming up every day. Check those out. Also been tossing around the idea of doing these intros video so that you guys can see me talking this out as well. It is a bit more work, and I'm not sure how much we'll get out of it. I think eventually that was always on the table of something I want to do eventually. I'm just not sure if the timing's right. If anybody would really have a hankering for that and would want to see my ugly mug when I'm, spitting these intros, let me know. Reach out on the Instagram page, Facebook page, whatever it is. Let me know if that's something you'd like to see. Like I said, now that YouTube page is getting back up and rolling, go over there and toss a subscription, comments. That's the algorithms on YouTube are very different. They need a lot of juice if you want to get going. So, adding comments, liking the videos, all that stuff goes a long way, bumping those views up. Really appreciate that. Twitter, I've been using Twitter quite a bit. I know I always talk about what a dumpster fire it is, but I feel like it's also so easy just to hit that retweet button and have really important information. And if you think that if you agree with me that I'm spreading important information, which is exactly what I'm trying to do here, is spread either important information or information that is just very interesting to me. Those two things, I find probably the best place I do that is Twitter, just because of how easy it is to retweet. If you want to go over there and follow me, it's dub_Von. I know it's a stupid handle. It lied to me and said the VonDubCast was available and did the old bait and switch. Once I hit accept, it gave me dub_Von for some bullshit reason. I talked to 1 million people, and apparently that's pretty standard for Twitter, but who's a woozle. That's what the Twitter handle is. Go over there, check it out. This intro is already getting so long, but I wanted to recap what an amazing UFC card that was last night. Israel Adesanya, my favorite fighter, just once again showing he's miles ahead of all the competition. Wasn't even close. And just every fighter top to bottom. What an amazing card that was. Little puppy update. She's getting better. She's learning a little bit more things. She's still bad, but she's getting cute. She's getting way bigger, and we just love her to bits. Work, have some really exciting news coming up in the next little while. I know I've been talking about how that's been getting me down a bit, and I needed to make a plan to find a better balance, and I think I have. Just need to unroll it now, and that should be coming more information in the next couple of weeks, and I'm really excited about it. So yeah, that's my life. I'm doing great. Doing a lot better. I hope you guys are doing better, and I hope you enjoy this episode. There's a lot of great information in it, and please pass it on to a friend if you do enjoy it. All right. See you guys. Beautiful. Well, thanks for being here, Cole. This is yet another good old Lister friend that has gone on to do some big and exciting things, just like everybody else that came through those hallowed halls. What have you been up to since I saw you last, Cole?
Well, I've been continuing school. Unfortunately, I've been in school for the past 8 years doing my bachelor's and now my master's. So I'm trying to finish up that. So I'm on the tail end of that, writing up my thesis and getting that ready to go, and then looking for work.
Yeah, that's the exciting part. Get into the real world and go see what it's all about. Hey, that's what was your minor or your undergrad and your you just said it. How am I forgetting this instantly? Into your post degree? Masters. Fuck me. I am just not on my game this morning.
Honestly, graduate school doesn't matter.
Yeah. I was so sure I wasn't going to do it in my life. I was like, I don't even need to learn the terms for it because I am not going back.
Yeah, no worries. So I did my bachelor's with a specialization in immunology. Oh, cool. And then I really like immunology, and I got involved in some lab work in my undergrad. And so I continued on and did am finishing up my master's in immunology.
Wow, what a prophetic major to go into, hey? Given the current times, maybe just for my audience, because my audience is more on the level of my intelligence than maybe yours. Would you just maybe let people know what immunology is? Because I feel like I have half an idea, but could probably benefit from a little clarifying. But I'm sure there's some people out there that don't know.
For sure. And don't put yourself down. Like, I'm sure you're plenty smart. There's nothing to worry about there. So immunology is the study of the immune system. So all of the cells, and the functions that they do, alongside kind of looking at different viruses, bacteria, fungi, and how they invade and interact with the body.
Right.
Really. So it's all about infections and clearing infections, cancers tied into there, allergies. What else? Like gastrointestinal stuff kind of bleeds over.
Yeah.
So all about like how your body fights infections and the mechanisms it does that with.
Yeah. And was that something that you were interested in going into school, or is that something kind of as you just went into general sciences, you took a class and it kind of grabbed you and you were hooked from there?
No. So I kind of found I liked that at the end of high school because that's when they first started teaching that.
Yeah.
I went into university thinking, I'm going to do pharmacology because I thought that was really interesting, which is the like more chemistry heavy side of pharmacy. Like it's creating the drugs and formulating them
and understanding the effects on the bodies and all that stuff. Yeah. Gotcha.
Yeah. And so I thought that was really cool my first year, but I failed out of that specialization.
I hope I didn't have anything to do that being your second year on the floor that was supposed to be keeping an eye on all you first years. I'll take a little bit of blame.
Not your fault at all. I mean, it happens. And I want to as well talk, like if you fail at something, doesn't mean that you have to quit it altogether. Like if you keep pushing forward, really that's the key.
Exactly.
I'll go into a bit of story actually about my undergrad because it's actually a system of failures. So I failed out of pharmacology. Didn't know if I was going back to university for my second year. Applied, got into immunology, started doing the immunology courses, was really interested in that. Went through my third year. I failed a full year course on human physiology. That kicked me out of the immunology specialization. And so for the next 2 years, then, because I did my undergrad in 5, I kept my grades up and kept working at it and kept doing like lab work outside of school.
Yeah.
And graduated with the immunology specialization still.
Right.
So,
wow. So you made it through. So then as you went forward, because this is kind of, for myself, it was the university experience was kind of first year. It was such a step up because where I went to high school, it wasn't, all the teachers always said, we're preparing for university. But what I found was, oh, I am not prepared at all. I have never studied before. I don't know have any of these habits. So first year was really tough. And then I kind of learned how to game the system and go, what you probably got to see of me in second year, it wasn't the best academic person to follow, let's say, right? I learned which classes you could skip and that kind of thing. But I also, at the same time, was finding ways that worked for me, that I could study and that I could figure things out. Was that similar for you, where you was half of the battle just kind of learning how you learn throughout that, and then in the later years you kind of had it down, or what?
Yes. So in a quick word, yes. Mm-hmm. Because I didn't have to study a lot in high school. Mm-hmm. So it was just kind of going to the classes, and then
same here,
just going through the motions. Mm-hmm. And then the first year university, I did the same type of thing, just went through the motions. And again, I failed out of the higher level specialization because of that, mm-hmm. which honestly was a nice wake up call and a good kind of okay, I can't do these things anymore. I need to learn. I now need to put my nose down and learn how to learn, which is difficult because they kind of teach you in school, but also not so much, because if you can get by without having to do it, there's no incentive mm-hmm. to do it. And when you get to university, you're at the end of that rope where you can just kind of coast through it, because there's so much more material.
Right. Yeah, that was very similar to what I thought. It was just kind of, if you just go up and you show up, you're going to take in, you're just going to osmosis in enough information to be able to pass. But there's so much, required of you that, the teacher's going to teach you, 30% of what the other 70 is on you. Right. And you can, you can pull that in. But then what I realized out of that was, well, if they're only teaching me 30%, why don't I try and learn all 100% on my own and not go to any of the classes or listen to any, right? Which is maybe not the best way to go about it, but that's kind of the one I've talked ad nauseum on this podcast about my experience at the university and kind of what I thought about it and that sort of thing. But one of the biggest enjoyments I did have was within that framework that I've already said my piece on. I love that freedom that allowed me to do that. I was one of those students where I didn't want to go to class, but there's some people that never missed one, and we could both get through and get to the end of the course. I'm sure our marks looked different, but at the end of the day, the piece of paper at the end didn't look any different. And I probably got, 3 to 7 times more beers drank in that time period. And I'm pretty proud of that. So, what I mean? I really enjoyed that freedom of just letting you kind of figure it out. And I wish that was mimicked more kind of into the real world. I feel like sometimes it's kind of taking the opposite tact, where they are trying to mimic that high school of just, if you show up, we'll hold your hand through it, kind of all the way into the workforce. And that's what, people are coming into the work world expecting that as well. And it's like, man, you need a little bit more of that freedom and the push to that. I wonder if you said you were in school for 8 years, how much did the school around you, maybe not your personal experience, because that's obviously going to change as we talked about, where you learn how to learn in that, but how did the school around you change? Did you see any noticeable difference in, the type of teaching and the type of, the zeitgeist around campus over those 8 years? Because it seemed like, even for me being there for 4, it seemed like it changed quite a bit from the first year to my last year.
I mean, that's a good question. When I went to university, I was very self-absorbed and was not very much affected.
I said, who isn't? Yeah.
But I wasn't as self-affected, I wasn't as affected really by what was going on, because for the most part, I was just head down, only focused on what I was doing.
Right.
And so I was going to class, I was working, and I was hanging out with friends, pretty much, I feel, is pretty normal.
Yeah.
And so those were the things that really, those were what I was focused on. And I guess being as well, in a science degree, I don't know if the learning or the teaching styles changed, because it was all pretty lecture based. There wasn't a lot, there were individual labs to go to, which were interesting, and I enjoyed doing those, and then learning how to do reports and do the experiments. Like that stuff was really cool to me. But in terms of the zeitgeist, I honestly just did not pay attention.
Yeah, that's fair. That is fair. I took a little bit of a different route. I think I was so unfocused on my studies, and the studies were such a backseat to what I was there to experience, where I really got to take in. And I feel like that was when we talk about our university experiences, and that's what I've been every time I've had somebody on that I met in Lister, I always ask them about their experience just to kind of juxtapose it against my own and see if they were seeing the same things. And that's very much what I find is if I ask someone that was maybe more of my style, where I was there to appreciate different parts of the university than maybe just strictly the school, it's one experience, and you get to pick up on a lot more of those other things. Whereas if you are locked down into that schooling, or not even just schooling, because I feel like this is very well mimicked in other ways, where there was also student athletes that very much was, they're so busy doing, 2-a-days on the football team, plus trying to, get a degree. They got the blinders on. They're not seeing anything else that's going on around them. And it's interesting to see kind of the different paths that you could take through school. Like I said, it's so up to you to kind of figure out what you want to do and how you want to take it and what you want to make out of it. It's quite interesting. And actually, I don't know if I actually know this. Where did you grow up, Cole?
So I grew up primarily in Calgary.
Okay. That's what I thought.
So I moved to Edmonton to do school. And for me, school, like, it is the experience, but it was always, okay, I need this paper that I can only access by going for this many years of school, because this is the type of work that I want to do outside of university. So it's always been very goal driven. Like even for graduate school, I like graduate school. It's fun. I like having the ability to work on my own project and kind of have a bit of freedom there. But like, there's a reason why I'm doing my master's. I'm not getting cahooled into doing a PhD.
Yeah.
Like,
better, hey? Yeah.
I'd like to think so, but
we'll have to see. If I talk to you in 10 years and you haven't gone back for that PhD, then we'll know that you made it out unscathed. There is a pull to that. And I feel like that is also something that was one of the things that I brought up about the university system, is what they're expecting going in. And I feel like somebody like that had that path that you just laid out of, I have a job or an industry or an area that I need to get into. There is no other available path but getting this piece of paper that will allow me to do that. This is what I see. If you want to be a doctor, if you want to be an engineer, there's certain paths where university is what you need. If you want to write a novel, do you really need that English degree? And if you're going into it, you need to understand that if you're going for that English degree, recognize that's not really what's going to push you, and that debt that you're taking on is not going to, it's not putting you forward any further into that career path, really. And I feel like that is what needs to be more understood and kind of taught to people, that if you're going for anything, if you're going to university for anything other than one of those careers that absolutely necessitates it, you need to have that full understanding of what you're getting yourself into, because I feel like that is where I see, it breaks my heart to see people go through this. And me and you probably know, 50 different people that went into this thinking university was one thing, racked up a lot of debt, and came out of it on the other side with they learned a lot about what it wasn't, but they're now in a different spot where I feel like it wouldn't be too hard for us to start changing the idea and people's understanding around these degrees of what they are, to help them be a little bit more prepared for what they're getting themselves into. Hey.
Yeah. Like for most people, university is a scam. There is no reason for most people to go to university, and it's, can I swear?
Fucking right, you can.
Excellent. It's bullshit. I know bullshit. It's not.
It's all good. It's
such a mild swear, but like, it's bullshit that when you go to high school, they are like, oh, you need to go to university to get and do anything. And it's like, no, that's such nonsense. You don't need to. And quite frankly, more people, if they want an education, they should be going to trade school, because trades will pay you more. There is less schooling, and it is more hands-on, which is more beneficial for like the greater population. Yeah. And honestly, as well, if you make it so that way you're pushing everybody to go to a university degree, the idea that they're selling in university is that you're going there, and when you get this degree, it is something of importance and it will guarantee you a job in that sort of field. That is the lie that they are telling, because if they then necessitate that everybody needs a university degree to even get into these
industries or
like starter positions, the entry-level positions.
Yeah.
Like, your university degrees means shit.
Yeah.
Like, if everybody has it, they've sold you a lie that it will get you somewhere.
Yeah. And I think another often forgotten about piece of that lie too is that message. I think you even said it almost verbatim of, if you don't get this piece of paper, you will never be able to do anything, right? Like, I feel like that is such a dangerous meme in the traditional sense of the word meme. I knew you'd get it, but the people listening might miss that one. Like the old like a cultural idea sense of a meme of, if you don't get this piece of paper, you are worthless, or you will never be able to reach these heights. I feel like that is so damning, because what we need to be teaching people is that you have endless possibilities within you. You can do whatever you want. There might be times where a university will help that or hurt that, but you don't need that. It is not predicated on you. It is predicated on you. The university might help you and it might not, but it has nothing to do with you. It will not set value for you. It will not change the value of who you are or what you can achieve. That is innate to you, right? And I feel like that is the most damaging part of this whole idea and this whole kind of drift towards get everybody needs a degree kind of thing, is that, because I feel like it just takes away so much of our potential of what we could be. Like, I know so many people that are talented and skilled in these areas that they could do it, right? Like, you start a YouTube channel or an Instagram page, and I see this all over the place. And actually, I see this the same with trade school too. Actually, I could make the same argument, because in Slave Lake, where I grew up, you'd see these extremely, extremely talented kids. I've named a few on here. Bros Builds on Instagram. He's a buddy of mine, and he does amazing builds there. One of my best friends going up, Cody Miller, just amazingly talented with his hands, could build shit, could do all these things. And it was something like, if you could have brought that kid at a young age, got him a camera and a computer, and said, we're going to start a YouTube page, and you're just going to, all those knives you build and go-karts and crazy shit, just put that out there. Like, the creativity is so stifled by this idea that there's a couple paths. You have to go to university or trade school or all these things, right? And it's just like, man, we need to be really changing how we think about those and changing how we talk about those, so that they're a tool. They're not an avenue that you need to go down. It's a tool you can pick up or choose not to, because maybe it's not for you. And I feel like that is almost more than anything what I would like to see change. And it's just a small change, because it's not like it has to change the structures or the institutions themselves. It's just people's mindset around what they're getting out of it and what we're telling these kids as they're growing up, right?
Well, I mean, the advent of the internet, you and I are the first generation that really like effectively grew up with it. Like, around your and my age, I remember hearing the dial tone. Yeah. And like, I remember early internet. Mm-hmm. And so the internet has changed things so drastically in 20 years that institutions just can't keep up. Or I don't know if they can't, but they haven't. Yeah. And so like, educating people on, hey, there are many options now, and the internet is so expansive that you can do so many things and make a living off of that you just never could consider before. Right. And I also want to take a moment and say, like, if you want to go to university and you have that path, like, great, go for it. Yeah. I just want to like not shit on university completely. Yeah, exactly. Because, right. There is some good like, if you for sure. Like, if you found it useful and you wanted to learn things and be in that environment, cool, go ahead. But like, getting back to the internet, like, there's so many things you can do on the internet. You can, like you said, start a YouTube channel, do Instagram. You can flip things on the internet. What else can you do? You can start like drop shipping businesses. You can do teaching. You can teach people. You can do vlogging. Like, there's so much that you can make a living off of doing on the internet that just is not in people's mindset, or at least not in kind of the school curriculum, because it's kind of outdated. And I mean, school is not the pedagogy. So the learning philosophy of school is not, I don't know if it's currently changing to keep up with the times, but at least from what I remember going through school, like elementary, junior high, and high school, like, it's just behind. And it is like, and it's not been updated to kind of reflect the world that we now live in. And it is a really big task to update it, because you'd have to be updating it continually, because things are changing so fast. But at the same point, like, you can say, okay, well, somebody has to do it. And who is going to be the teacher that goes and volunteers to do it? And if they do, fantastic. But then they have to then convince this, in Calgary, it's CBE. I don't know, in Edmonton, I would say EDE, but like they have to convince the school board. It's like, hey, we should be changing this all the time. And
Yeah.
like all of these places have very limited money because also bureaucracy, like don't want to change because fuck it. I don't know.
It's worked for 30 years. Like, why change it now? Let's dig in.
Yeah. But it needs to change. And it's a lot of effort on few individuals to make it change. And that's daunting. And so I don't fault people for it not changing.
Exactly.
But
yeah. It's hard to find fault because it's, when you zoom out and look at it, it's very natural. You just said there's me and you and people our age have a very innate understanding of that fact that if you have a passion for something, with the advent of the internet, you can find a way to monetize that passion. You can find a way, right? But now there's this disconnect where everyone under a certain age understands that, and everyone above a certain age will never be able to fully understand that. So now there's this disconnect where there's this generation coming up that has very little power, but it has the knowledge of what it's going to look like. And then there's this other group that has all this power and is trying to help, right? They're trying to aid these young kids and show them onto these paths, but they don't know that there's not two paths anymore. There's 2,000, right? There's 1,000,000. There's an infinite paths. They just don't understand it. So they're trying to guide. They're just putting the cattle guards down to guide everybody off of these other paths because they're scary and they don't understand them, right? Like right now I'm going through it, right? Trying to tell people, I'm actively trying to work myself into a position where I'm going to make very little money at the start doing a podcast versus, a six-figure job that anybody would kill, right? Like that is so mind-blowing to people. And it brings out fear and anger, and it brings out so many of these emotions out of people, but it's clear it's like, it's just a disconnect, right? If I could sit with you for an hour and discuss it and tell you the way I see it, I feel like you'd understand. But to do that on a societal level with thousands, millions, billions of people, that's a very hard change to do. And I see that reflected in so many of these areas, right? And it kind of leaves the two options. And I see this with the university. I see this with media. I see this with so many things. Is the change is happening. It's happening all around you. And you have two choices. You can adapt. You can, become the Netflix. You can become whatever it is, or you can dig in your heels and you become the blockbuster. And I see that so much. I feel like mainstream media is doing it right now. Universities are doing it right now, are just digging their heels in and kicking and clawing to hold on to what they have instead of saying, you know what, things are changing. We need to adapt and we need to change with it. They're just digging in. And it seems so silly because it's almost, the cliche of history repeats itself, but you just see it happen over and over again. And it's just so tough for these entrenched power structures to want to change. Their whole dynamic is not to change and to force everything to change around it. But that just doesn't work when you enter a world where the internet comes in and changes everything like that, right? Like we still haven't even it seems like people almost assume that the ramifications of what the internet has already been seen, and we know it. We're still changing, and we're still like molding, and the world is flying around and in this absolute flux all the time. And I feel like the more people understand how in flux we are and how fast things are changing, they're so much better than those people that are either from their own fault or just the fault of what they got into or their profession. I think a lot of times just digs them into it, right? And it's almost tough to watch from the side. It's like seeing a train wreck that you can see coming down the road, but you can't do anything to stop it. Hey, it's quite the thing. I'm curious then, if you had your nose in the books and you were concentrating on that pretty hard, I'm curious what you thought of the difference between the undergrad and the postgrad degrees, because I know I've never done one, but my sister did a master's, my girlfriend did a master's. I see all these people doing a master's, and the experience seems so different. I'm curious in one of the hard sciences like immunology, what that looks like. Even like, what does a master's degree in immunology even like begin to look like once you get into that graduate program?
So like what graduate school is, really, it's learning how to like think and formulate projects. Like it's for science, particularly for immunology, it's about like diving really into the scientific method. I have a project that I started now 3 years ago, and I am completing it now at this point, and I will be publishing the results in a peer-reviewed journal. Like the goal is to learn how to think about things, because like I'd say high school and undergrad are like learning what things are, and grad school is more learning how. And like learning, I guess, not necessarily responsibility, but kind of, because you're responsible for yourself. Like for my master's, because it's a thesis-based grad program, I had to take three courses, which was awesome because I fucking hated courses by the end of university, and the testing's bullshit. Like, very happy that I got to do that. And then the courses also shifted, because one of my courses was, okay, write a review paper on a topic like that you would submit somewhere, or that would be the beginning chapter of your thesis. That was a course. Another course, like admittedly that I didn't have to take, but I did, was how to write a PhD proposal. But I took it because I took all the other courses I could take in undergrad. So I was kind of limited in what I could even take.
I hear you.
But it's like, it's teaching you, okay, this is, you now have all of these resources and you get to use them how you see fit, like with guidance for how to get adequate. I want to like stay away from the word right, because in science, there's not really right answers. It's how do you prove
repeatability?
Like how do you, you're learning the ability to be able to prove what you're saying. And so these are all the tools that you have to do it. And you have all of the resources available to you, and you're going to be guided through it. At least if you have a good graduate supervisor,
right?
They'll help you with it, or the people in your network will help you. Definitely, like the people in your department will help you move towards generating a piece of knowledge effectively that you can share with other people.
Right.
And that's, like, in a nutshell, the best way that I can describe like a hard science thesis-based grad school experience.
And I hear, go ahead.
Alongside also networking with your peers and learning how important it is to have a collaborative environment that you can bounce ideas off of people. Like, you can only get so far by doing things yourself. Like, you need to interact with the people around you.
That is, it's very interesting you say that, because that brings up a lot of things. I'm just wondering where to start even. I heard you mention responsibility, and when you transition from that undergrad to the postgraduate kind of thing, the different responsibilities you have. And one that I didn't hear you mention, but I'm going to guess that you'll agree with me, is one of the biggest responsibilities you have now is the responsibility to the scientific method. And I feel like over the last 2 years, that is something that I have realized that I feel like is not holding the strength it once did. The type of science we're seeing and the type of leniency away from the strict scientific method of what makes science and what is truly testable and what makes a good study versus a crap one. And it seems like not a lot of people are taking that responsibility seriously. Is that something that you see as well? And I'm curious, to what degree do they put that emphasis on that throughout that degree? Because it sounds like that's exactly what they're trying to teach you to do. If they're trying to teach you how to do good science, at the very base of that is, understanding the scientific method and how strictly you need to take out all confounding factors and take all emotion, all politics, all everything out of it. And it seems like the last couple of years that has broken down, and it's just an input, like the levees broke and the, emotion came in, politics came in, and there's all these things just muddying it up. And then they call it science. And to someone like me and you, that's not science. As soon as an inch, a little snowflake of politics or anything else falls into that, that's tainted. That's no longer science, because now that's a confounding factor, right? When you really hold to the strictness of what it is. And I'm curious to see what the current day university is doing about that, because if it was me, it'd be red alert of, if we saw the science happening over the last 2 years, we need to, this next generation needs to understand this and to fight back against it. Did you see that? Was there emphasis put on that, or am I off in left field?
Well, because I'm kind of confused by what you mean as examples of science, because again, like, admittedly, my head is kind of down, and I am focusing only on like peer-reviewed,
for sure,
articles in science and like actual science. And so, like, it is no longer science in my idea when it becomes, like you said, tainted by opinion and politics. Like, that's not science. Science is just straight up facts. It's like this pen,
right? Like,
this is here, this is what it is, and these are its properties.
Right. Maybe here's a way I can clarify it a little bit, is people's understanding of what constitutes science is that it's peer reviewed. And that is the only basis. If it's peer reviewed, that's science, right? That passes all the markers. But what it used to be is, you'd have your own judgments and you would look at the details of the study. Okay, how do they do this study? Is this study garbage, or is this study, did they miss something, right? Can you look at it? And I feel like that's what I've been seeing of all these studies being thrown around, but they're peer reviewed, of course, right? But then when you actually go into them, it's bad science and it muddies the waters, and you see this all over. I think one of the biggest ones of this is mass. Throughout this pandemic, there's been so many people there. Look at this study, mass don't work. Look at this study, mass work. Look at this study. And there's all these studies with different methodology, different thing, different, and not ever really taking the epidemiological side of it of, well, let's look at large scale, all these tests together and see what we come up with. And what it felt like to me was our barrier for what we consider science is so low that you can pretty much wield it like a weapon at anybody, the people on the one side of the argument that are pro-mask or anti-mask, right? Both can wield this weapon of science of how they do it just by finding the particular study, right? And it was, when you go into those studies, almost on both sides, a lot of the time they're not done to that degree of what you'd want, or they're not done to the degree, to the findings that they're saying out, right? Like that this is what we found, this is the degree that we believe in it, doesn't actually back up what their testing was, right? And that's what I feel like I'm seeing. And I've listened to some really smart people talk about peer review and what peer review is doing to science and kind of the holes that are in it, and they make a lot of sense. But at the end of the day, what do you do? Because what's the next best thing? Like, how do you, I don't really have any better options than it, but it just seems like the peer review process has been captured by these deeply entrenched, political people within the university system. And they all get the say of what goes in and what doesn't. I think I just thought of a way better example of it. But I've already been talking, maybe if we get more into it, I heard anyway, it's a long story, but it might bring it back up if we get into it. But just what I'm seeing is, the bar that we of what we call science is not being held. And I feel like there's a lot of downstream consequences that we're all feeling from that. And there's so much confusion and so much people don't know where to turn, because they seem like, if you're just a Joe Schmo that doesn't really care about science, you're a welder, you don't care about science, and people are throwing studies at you, saying different things, and you don't know how to parse through them. It just creates so much mud and so much confusion that it allows, people to be hurt. And that's kind of what I've been seeing. And that's what I've been, upset with. And those are the more level one kind of things. I think there's also some real bad shit that we've been seeing that have been, just politics getting in the way of science, right? Like I don't know if you've seen anything on this, but ivermectin, a drug that we've had for 50 years, very well studied, very safe, has been demonized into this super unsafe thing. Whereas remdesivir, that, and you take one that's off patent, like ivermectin, nobody's really making money off it. You take remdesivir, it's what, $2-3 a pop. And they're absolutely demonizing this one and building this one up. And when you look at the actual epidemiological studies, like what was happening in India, where it was all hands on deck. Like, this is critical. They introduced ivermectin into their protocols, instant change, like night and day. But still, if you, the scientists that testified to Congress about ivermectin, that video of him testifying to Congress is still removed from YouTube because it's a conspiracy theory, right? Like, that's where the politics gets in the way of the science, and it's muddying the waters for financial gain because they have a drug they can make a lot of money off of, and a drug that's off patent. And that's where people are getting hurt. And that's where I see it's just like, man, it used to be that science was so held up that was so, to every scientist, if you even mess with that true thing, everyone's raising the bells. But it seems like the whole system has been captured somehow by whoever it is. And now that's not happening. And it's allowing these things to go forward where it's not science, it's politics that are making the decisions.
Yes. In that, like, I'm still a little bit confused by like particular examples that you're saying.
Yeah.
But like, if you have evidence that ivermectin works, say it works. I'm not well versed in this, so I'm using
fair enough
broadly as examples. Yeah. Or we'll just say not even any drug A and drug B.
Yeah, perfect.
So people are trying to push drug A because it's expensive and they'll make money off of it. Mm-hmm. And drug B is equally effective. If people are following what science is, then it shouldn't matter and they should listen to the facts. Right. That is what the sharing of knowledge is.
Mm-hmm.
And I don't think that like it is science becoming politicized because now everybody has access to it. Everybody has access to the internet, which is great. Everybody should have access and know this. But the problem is that it's a double-edged sword, because if you give everybody the information, anybody can interpret it in a different way. And I'll go back a step before that and say, like, if you're looking at study design, yes, the parameters of a study design are very specific for what they're looking at. And one study may be looking at one thing, and it's part of, or so your idea is a tree, and one person is doing a study on one branch.
Right.
And another person does another study on a branch that comes off of that initial branch, but is also different. But they're both related. Yeah. And so then that becomes confusing for people, because it's like, oh, well, they're both on this thing. Yeah. And it's like, well, yes, but also no, because they're looking at different aspects of it.
Right. Yeah.
And so like it is very daunting, and science is not, it's not easy, particularly because science is meant to change. It is meant to revise itself continually and revise itself based on proven fact, on repeatable fact. Like in what you're saying with, I read an article the other day, which is a problem with science, is that sensationalized science gets published in high impact factor journals because it's really cool to see, but it can't be replicated. So it's an issue. Yeah. And so other people aren't able to replicate that. And so that should bring that finding into doubt, because it's like, oh, you found it once, but people tried doing the same things that you did and it's not showing up. So either you did something that you're not telling people, or your finding is an anomaly. Yeah. And if it's an anomaly, it's cool to write it up and mention it and say like, hey, we found this one time. But it's equally important to say, look, we did this these other times and under the exact same conditions as your study and found something different. Yeah. But the conditions between studies is daunting and can be confusing, because they may not have the same parameters, even though they're looking at similar aspects or the same topic. Right. So ultimately, though, if new data presents itself, the scientific method is meant to adapt to the new data that it finds. Right. And if people are not doing that, then they may still be using science, like the base findings, like this pen. It's not inherently good or bad. It's just a tool. Yeah. And you can use it to make beautiful art, and that, or grotesque art, honestly. Like you can do whatever to make so many different things. It can be used to write Mein Kampf, great works of literature, but it can also be used as a weapon. Yeah. Like as an actual weapon. And like science does not care. Science is the pen. Right. It's there whether you like it or not. True science. Yeah. Yeah. And I think that's where my frustration and disconnect is I agree with everything you just said. And that's what science should be, but it doesn't seem like that's what seems like it's getting pulled farther and farther away from that ideal, which I agree is what we need. And a big piece of that is, like you say, the scientific method needs all the information to be able to be input, to go in to get the outputs. Right. But now what happens when huge parts of the input for completely non-science-based reasons, completely politicized reasons, start taking away inputs that we really needed? Case in point, lab leak versus natural origin. Those two things, like those are both hypotheses that are on the table. And at the start, they took one off the table and they demonized it and they said, if you even bring this up, you are labeled all this stuff. And then, which is funny because at the same time they did all that, every intelligence agency for every major country in the world all said, no, we think about with 90% certainty, this is more so come from the lab. But now you have all these scientists that have a huge input. Like for somebody that understands science, the difference between a natural or naturally originating disease and a, artificially, like gain of function disease is vastly different. The response is different. The inputs are different. And now we had about a year and a half of
everyone trying to do the best science they could with poor inputs due to politics. And that is bad, right? And not just politics, but also due to just natural human nature of, we don't want to seem, like humans have emotions, right? And we have all this extra baggage that comes around this, right? So now it became racist to assert that that this lab hypothesis was on the table, right? That's not anybody coming down. That is just the natural tendencies of human nature to bring their, interpersonal politics within, everyone trying to get along into these things, but it muddies the waters and it makes it difficult, right? And that is one where it's kind of a natural one. But then you see these purposeful messing with it, right? Like for a political reason or all these other reasons. And it just hurts me so much to see this beautiful thing of science. Like, I love science, well done science that, I'm right with you. Like if I wasn't such a, on that path of, you got to make money, you got to make money, you got to make money. That's why I went into business. I didn't care what degree I got. I just, was following path. If I actually followed what I wanted, I would have been in science for sure. Right. Like, I am scientist through and through. And I hold such high esteem to it that it absolutely breaks my heart to see what's happening as of late. And there's some really brave voices speaking out against this. I think Bret, I would point people to them all the time, Bret and Heather Weinstein, who are both amazing evolutionary biologists. Bret did his doctorate work on the exact type of bats that they said this virus came from, like in the jungle, working with them for like 6 months to a year. Like, he is the expert on this, and they represent science to such a level, but it seems like they just get demonized as the same thing because they're not on the script of what is okay to talk about. It's kind of sad to see. It
is, but at the same point, is that an issue with science or is that an issue with politics?
Agreed.
Like, I don't think that science is at fault here, because and again, you've got an army of scientists and technicians and people working on this stuff that like don't have gain to say one thing or the other. They're trying to find out what's happening.
And they're being hurt by the lack of information, those people.
Yeah. There's a coding mantra where like shit in, shit out. Like, if you're not giving these people that are trying to work with it all of the adequate tools to do it, and you have politicians or politics interfering with it, like, that's a huge problem with politics. And I don't think it's an issue with the science, because
you're right.
It's a political issue. It's not a science issue.
For sure.
Because with all of these studies say they don't have access to doing something, they have to still make the best that they can with what they have. And so they create a study based on these conditions with what they have. And so like, that doesn't invalidate their findings. That just means that based on the reagents and the methodology they use, this is their result.
Right. And I think you're right on the money there. And I think I maybe just didn't articulate it good enough, because you're right. It's not a problem with science. Science can't have problems, right? When we talk, what we actually talked about at the start and what we established for what we consider real science, that is ineffable. It's not even a thing. It's a tool. It's neither good nor bad. It's not a problem with science. It's a problem with everything that can go into science. It's an insulation problem around science. That's what it is. For science to work, it needs to have a very strong insulation, right? And for a long time, that's what it was. And that's what the university systems came up with, because that's what tenure is, right? That's exactly what tenure is we want to give you this absolute isolation to do whatever you want and just figure out, follow the science, follow your nose, follow your intuition, and just see where it brings you. Don't have any idea, don't have any emotion, don't have any ties to it. And I feel like that has broken down. And there's key culprits. I think mainstream media was one of the worst ones for this, of taking on whatever politics and changing the entire zeitgeist of the world to believe one thing or another, which inevitably misleads science, or not science, misleads the people trying to do science into these, gets off the path, right? And
it can definitely impact the individual scientists in a way, but I don't think that it's necessarily a fault of the method. Like, we're human, we're fallible, we're emotional creatures that try and wrap ourselves in reason,
right?
Which fundamentally is very difficult to do. And so yes, people have their biases that they have to contend with, their internal biases. Right. And so that's the goal of what peer review is you have people that know nothing maybe experts in a different field, but don't know what you're talking about intricately, or they're able to see it at a different angle that you are just unable to because you're so entrenched in what you're doing.
Yeah.
Like that's the whole concept behind having a peer-reviewed system. But if you're saying, which I agree with, if you're changing the environment around what peer review is, that say only reviewers who believe a certain thing are able to even see these articles, that becomes an institutional problem.
Right. And here's maybe a different way to throw it at you, because I do feel like this is more of just an example to kind of show what I'm talking about, but I also do think it rings true. And this is actually something that I do believe, maybe not to the degree that I'll make the point with. It might be ramping it up a little bit, but now you take something like the university system, and when you talk about science, it should be completely agnostic politically, but you see throughout the university system that is very dominant one way, right? It's almost completely to one way, and it's to the left, right? Pretty clear. I got to see it going through school, and it really, and I think for the better, it probably pulled me more to the center and I came out of it a better person, right? But what I didn't like about it is now you have probably 20 to 30 years worth of people coming into science that are hugely, hugely biased to this one side, which when you talk about, if you're doing science right, that shouldn't matter. But I think that when you understand human nature and how hard it is to keep your biases out, maybe only the top 5% of the best scientists, and this is what makes them the best scientists, can actually turn all that shit off, right? I think Bret and Heather Weinstein are a great example of this, is they leave all that shit at the door. I'm sure they have their biases too, but they're able to take it off. Now, we have all these kids, I think that also gets harder to do. I think that gets easier to do with age. It's a practice skill of turning that off. So now you have all this army of 22 to 26-year-old people that are absolutely indoctrinated with this one way of thinking. And now something happens where there's, a virus, and it's politicized. And now your absolute number one enemy, Trump, the other side of it is saying this one thing, right? He's saying that it's a lab origin theory. So now it is so diametrically opposed that to everything that you are, that now you can't even keep that theory on the table because that is the enemy, right? And now your biases have come in, and now not only is it it's everything outside that is pushing you and giving you bad information, but not only that, you should be able to block that out and just say, no, I'm leaving both on the table. But you saw time after time, so many people just went with that, and they took these huge implications completely off the table, right? I think, even with certain drugs, right? Like hydroxychloroquine is not the best one to throw out there, but you could see like it, not only are we not even going to not only we're not going to use it, but we're not even going to investigate it. We're just going to label it with this huge thing. We're not going to run it through this methodology we call science to see if it is good or bad. We're just going to label it with bad because of who it represents. And that's where I see a real dangerous departure from science. And I think you would hope that there'd be people calling those people out in real time, but it seems like it was such a broad idea, and it was so influential across the entire society that nobody wanted to speak up and say, you know what, hey, that lab leak thing is pretty, not to pat myself on the back, but I was saying this from episode 1 of this podcast. I was saying this with a lot of things, which lately it's been nice to be vindicated on a lot of these things, right? Like that there is a lot of, nefarious powers that be that are not to put my full conspiracy hat, not causing these things and not doing this, but definitely taking advantage of them and muddying the waters with their taking advantage of, because if you're trying to follow the science, and you have these huge power bases following the money, that pulls you off of following the science pretty clearly, right? So that's more of what I'm seeing and what's frustrating me as of late. And what gives me hope is that there are those people, those real scientists, they don't fall for that bullshit. They see through this. And that's what that Dr. Peter Corey, I think his name. Anyway, he's the one that testified about ivermectin to Congress. Like, he's one of those guys where he just said, you know what, politics aside, I don't like this guy either, but this is where the science led us, and we had a team of people, and this is what we found. And I would have hoped that if that would have happened, right? Like, you go to Congress, that gets the tires turning. YouTube pulled the video down of him testifying at Congress. The lead scientist in coming up with the protocol for fighting COVID-19 says, hey, we've got it, guys. This is, it's not a silver bullet, but it's amazing a treatment. If you can get it to people within the first 2 or 3 days of catching it, it's amazing what happens. And as a prophylactic, if you take it, it's comparable to vaccines. And they took it down. Like, man, if that isn't politics getting in the way of science, I don't know what is. And that is so egregious. Somebody's got to pay for that. Like, like it's almost like after 2008 when they did all the bailouts, and it's like, somebody's got to pay for this. Like you just see what kind of a grift just happened and they get away with it. I feel like the same thing is happening now, where there's these people that, for whatever financial ties, whatever financial reasons, are standing in the way of real science and real people's lives that are at risk, right? Like I think in Canada and America, we're in a little bit better place, but you look at India and the reaction that in inputting ivermectin into their protocol had on them. They were in a really, really bad place before that. And maybe 3 months ago, or maybe 3 months earlier, that could have been happening and all those lives could have been saved. Like that is real blood on people's hands that, just by nothing else, but pulling people away from that scientific method or tearing layers off that insulation. That's what happens. And it's scary. And that's kind of to rewind this all the way back to the first question I asked about it, of how much emphasis do they put on the scientific method and that insulation around it, and to leave all that baggage at the side. I would hope that would be the number one thing they're railing into you guys in that school every day, right? Of just, that's the importance of it. And is that what you saw?
I mean, that's what I see in doing my studies.
Right.
I mean, I am in the, I'm part of the department that has actually been able to stay open throughout the entire pandemic, because I'm in the Department of Medical Microbiology and Immunology.
Yeah, that's an important one, hey?
Yeah, half the department works now on COVID.
Yeah.
But at the same point, I don't see anybody's results being tainted by what they're doing, because you're working with things in a dish.
Yeah.
Like, the virus does not care. Whatever virus you're working with doesn't care about what you think about it. It doesn't care whether you like it or not. The cells have zero input on what's happening. Like, all of these biological agents have zero care. Viruses, bacteria, any sort of pathogen does not care what you look like, who you like, what you do. It's trying to survive. And that is solely what it is doing. Like, there's no politics when looking at the effects of what it does to the body.
Right.
There is no politics in what treatment is just empirically effective.
Right.
And so, and that's why I was confused, because these articles are still coming out. You may not, there's articles that you may not like, but they have legitimate data. And it's how, like you said, science is being used as a weapon or a club. And it sucks, because now that there's so much information, it really necessitates that you as an individual needs to have a lot of responsibility. Yeah. You need to be exceptionally responsible for yourself, for making positive changes in the society that you live in. You need to be responsible and back up what you're saying. Make sure that you are fact checking things and can do it with accuracy. Right. And you need to, and if you are an expert in something, then you need to be accountable to that and be telling people the facts. Right. And so I don't see it changing. Maybe I'm not high enough in the pecking order in the university to fully answer your question. Right. Because for example, what I can particularly say, my work still goes on the same. Yeah. And I really appreciate what you're saying about, when you get down to a certain level, it's just the data that you're looking at. You're just performing experiments. More so than that, of kind of what I'm saying, I think it's so important for your understanding, right? If you're the one coming up with what experiment you're going to do on that dish, if you are 100% in belief that this is a natural origin, there's no way it could have come from a lab, you might design that experiment differently than if you knew it might have been come from a lab, right? There's certain things that would change. I feel like that is go ahead. If I can say for that, say you're looking at genomic data. So you're looking at the DNA sequences. When you're running analyses on those, you're running them against a database. Right. You're running them against a full database with millions and millions and millions of individual sequences that you are comparing them against. And it has an algorithm that matches them to that. If it is so different, I'm not I do not have a stake whether it is lab or
right. Yeah.
from the environment.
Mm-hmm.
The fact is we have to deal with it.
Yep.
That is the key thing.
Mm-hmm.
But for example, if you're looking at its DNA or its genomic components, like you're running it against a database to see what most likely fits and what is the closest matches. Right. And I don't see how you can, unless you were excluding parts of the database, which at that point you have to include in your methods. Mm. But if you run a blast search against the sequence, like it's going to come up either it's very similar to previously seen strains that have been documented, or it's not. Mm-hmm. And so like I'm confused by like, can you manipulate that? Because I don't think that's something that can be manipulated, because you test it against one database and say, okay, it's inconclusive. You test it against 2 or 3 more databases, mm-hmm. and then you compile it together and say, look, it's either close to what we've seen before in nature, or
right.
it's not.
Right. Yeah. And I see that. And I think in that one specific testing framework that you set up, it might not have that much effect. But now let's go into you're modeling this. So you, based off that this is 100% natural origin, there's no way. So now you're doing modeling into the future of what you think the progression of the disease is going to be. And you're doing that off of these models that we've established off of naturally originated disease, where if you were to keep the other hypothesis on the table, you would keep in the back of your mind, I'm going to model this off the data that we have, because that's the best we have, right? We don't have all this modeling data for these man-made disease or artificially advanced diseases. We don't have that, right? But I feel like there's 2 different stories, and to keep that in your mind of, hey, we're modeling this, but we're keeping an extra degree of error because this could be completely different. And I would argue probably is completely different, because we've seen it's so different from normal viruses in so many ways already that we've never seen, right? Like we've never seen a virus be able to jump to humans and between humans in that small of a framework. Usually it takes, a couple months, it takes a while, but for it to instantly be attuned to human flesh and jump from one animal to another, and then to be able to be transmissible. Usually what you see with like, I think it was like mad cow and stuff, it goes for a long time, and then it learns how to jump to humans. That's the first step. And then it learns how to jump between. Go ahead.
Can I say something on that?
Of course.
With
you're the expert. So, I don't know. Fuck all.
It's difficult because they're all viruses. So they're not parasites. They're like, there's their own type of organism.
Yeah.
And the only sort of example that we have for that is SARS-CoV-1, mm-hmm. which was what caused the SARS outbreak in 2003, I think, in China and mm-hmm. like in Canada, in Toronto.
Yeah.
Like that's the only model that we can even use against that.
Right.
And we can only model what we know based on what we've seen. And if you can group, because SARS-CoV-2 is a coronavirus, you could group it based on other characteristics that we see of coronaviruses, but to compare it to influenza is disingenuous because it's a different type of virus.
Right.
And it has different characteristics.
And you still see people do that very frequently compared to the two, right? Even though I agree with what you're saying. Yeah. But maybe here's a way I can put it that might better articulate the point I'm trying to make. I think you'll agree with me on this. Almost more important than what you know is the degree of what you don't know. Right. And I feel like if you assume that this is and this is just one piece of the puzzle, I feel like you can take this idea and take it on all these. I'm just using the lab leak versus that as an easy one to point to. Now, if you were planning experiments as if we know what this is, or not know what this is, but have ideas and have models to go off of, we have this certain idea of how big this circle of what we don't know is. When you add in a factor like artificially messing with this disease and adding functionality and all that bubble grows exponentially. We've never seen a bubble this big, right? Like, because there's so many factors that we don't know of. What could they have changed? What were they working on? And I feel like that is so important and really will dictate what it is. And not only that, but if that does turn out to be true, and that's what it is, there's probably a lot of information that is within that lab of what they know, that all these scientists across the globe that are just, burning the midnight oil, doing amazing work. We've seen some amazing, scientific breakthroughs in the last 2 years, but they could be armed with so much better information and so much better of a starting block. Like that might have knocked 4 months of really hard scientific work off of our table to move us forward. Right. That's where I worry about that. Is I think at a certain point you get a certain farness away, and you're right. It becomes, whether it's this or that, we just got to deal with it. I agree. But I think even having said that, I think that always does matter. And I think the more information and the more the like you said, garbage in, garbage out, that is a huge, massive input of where did this thing come from, right? Like, and to say that doesn't have an impact. And that's just, like I said, that is just one of these factors that has been politicized about it, right? Like, then you add in all the other ones that have been, we don't know if we have the right inputs because there's all these politics surrounding that, and you add those all together, and it really has muddied the waters more than anything, right?
Well, yes, in that, I agree with you in that, well, being cognizant of what we don't know is important. And that's, kind of the building block of how to make an experiment.
Yeah, exactly.
I don't know what this is.
Yeah.
And so I have a hypothesis. This is what I think will happen.
Mm-hmm.
But what I'm going to do is I'm going to appropriately control to narrow down and have one or two outputs that will be the answer. Like, we're going to take away all of the extraneous noise.
Yeah.
And we're going to see what happens. And so at that point, like, you can think it's going to do something, but you thinking it's going to do something or having a different origin will not change how it works in an experiment. Like, it will just do what it does, and your job is to record it.
Yeah.
And express what happens.
Right.
And so that's where it comes in. Like, it doesn't matter at this point where it came from. It matters how we deal with it. But how we deal with it is by isolating individual situations or individual variables, and we isolate for those variables, and we see in the few possibilities of variables that it could be what it is. Like, and your biases, at that point, your biases don't even matter, because you're observing what happens. You're not influencing it, because you've put them at the same starting point, and you're looking to see what happens.
Right. I would agree. I would agree with that, Cole, given infinite time, infinite resources, because I think if you have as many scientists testing as many variables as they want with as infinite timeline, that all works out. But now, when you have limited resources, limited time, people are dying, we need this fat, economies are collapsing, that changes that variable. So now you can only say there's, 50 billion variables within that need to be tested to really isolate exactly what we're working with, right? This is more abstract now that we've gone into this, but if prior information or access to certain information would you maybe dictate the important variables to look at, that can also have an effect, right? And that's what I'm saying. I agree that on a certain time frame and a certain way far out, it does become that where we need to test everything. We need to just figure this thing out. We need to understand this from first principles. That's the only way we're going to beat this thing, is just to really understand it from first principles. Eventually it's going to take a while. I just think with better information, it just sucks that timeline up of us getting to that point where we understand this thing inside and out. We know exactly what it is, what it's going to do next, what it's going to do next Tuesday. Right? Like, that's it. That's pretty much the goal of what we're doing. I just think we do that faster with the better inputs and the better understanding, the lack of artificial, or not artificial, but, non-scientific variables coming in to muddy the waters of that.
Yes, absolutely. But with an unknown disease, effectively, for something that we don't know about, we have to start at square one. And so the points that are being made or looked at first are the major points. Like, they're not, if you're looking at a tree, say, you're going to be looking at the major branches first, and then you'll slowly diffuse out into the smaller branches. But the major questions that will bubble to the surface are like, how transmissible is it? How fast is its mutation rate?
Right.
How will it work in a group environment? Like, how will vaccines reduce, or how will vaccines affect its spread in a population, depending on how much of a population is vaccinated, which you can model for in, like, we now have computers powerful enough to model that. Same thing with masks. Like, you say in a computer generated simulation, if nobody in the population wears masks, if 20%, if 50%, if 80%. And you can see, based on what we've seen in the past for coronaviruses, like you can see how that typically spreads. It may be different as life plays out, but we can't predict that.
Right.
Like all we have is these models to work off of. And that's like, yes, if we could have skipped those first few steps, that would have been awesome.
Yeah.
And that's like, and so that way we already have the key points. That would have been great. But like, from how I understand the science works, which I think is pretty reasonable, at least in how it works, is like you understand the key points first and you test for those points and then you go off from there. And because we have to start from zero, we're not going to get it right. And that's okay, because science is meant to be revised. And but again, it's difficult for people because they have to keep up with it and they have to keep up with the revisions.
Right. Yeah. And that's what muddies the waters too, is people they read this study 3 months ago and now it's been completely refuted and we're on to new science now. Like it's been revised 6 times since then, but they're still operating off of old information. At
the same point, like it's your responsibility as somebody who's looking into this and say like, look, this is when this information was. Is there anything that's newer? Or if you come across a new piece of information, it is also your responsibility to share it. Like the world sucks and it requires you to be really responsible, and being responsible is incredibly hard. Like
I'm straight.
Like that. Yeah. That's at least how I see it. Like,
yeah, no, I think that's pretty astute.
And so like, it's like with regards to science, you can look at something, but if somebody shows, like, say, you found something that was written in June of last year when stuff was just coming out for COVID in particular. And then you find a paper that's written in May of this year. And if the one in May of this year contradicts or like has a more accurate representation of what's happened, then you should follow that. Right. But if the modeling, say from the June paper of last year, still holds up in the May paper, then they're both equal. Or maybe they're looking at different variables of it. So they're not really equal. Like that's exactly where I was going to go, because I feel like so many people are doing that of just saying like, oh, well, this one's newer, but it's like, no, that's not science. You need to look at the actual methodology of the testing that got them to that area, because, you know, this one might be newer, but maybe they had like a bunch of confounding factors, and you can look, because I mean, me and you both know that there's peer-reviewed papers that you look at and you look at the methodology once and you go, what the fuck is that? Like, that is garbage. Right. And you see it all the time. And I feel like that's where people are using it as a tool instead of understanding science and looking at it and judging it for themselves of what kind of methodology were they holding themselves to? What kind of statements are they making? How, because if you look at the best science, what is that saying? It answers the most questions with the least assumptions. Parsimonious. Yeah. Exactly. And I feel like that is where people aren't looking at that even as a factor. They're not looking at how good the study. It's just, once it's peer reviewed, oh, this is science, right? I'm going to put it in front of you, and this is just as good as this science. They're equal. They're peer reviewed, right? Well, because if you're offering up a piece of information and somebody else is offering up a piece of information, if you're having a discussion about it, and it's both of your jobs to look at both pieces of information and analyze it, right? And say, look, like, maybe they're both talking about, say, we'll change the subject. Say they're both talking about how effective different engines are, right, in a race car. Yeah. But the engine types are fundamentally different. One's a 6-stroke, one's an 8-stroke. Yeah. Like, you can still say that the conclusions in both of the papers are correct based on the assumptions for that paper, but you have to define what the assumptions are when you're saying that information. Right. Yeah. Yeah. And I think you just mentioned something that I think is maybe my biggest point in all of this is, you know, if somebody's offering this information, somebody's offering this information, you have a discussion, right? It ends right there, because what we're seeing is
they're shutting down the discussion, right? Like what happened when people said like, hey, I know this natural origin thing is here, but we want to discuss that. They shut down the conversation altogether. And that is the enemy of science, shutting down conversation and putting all these things in a box that can't even be talked about is very dangerous. And so in so many ways, because that's what allows it. So now there's real strong evidence coming out that, you know, the inspection, the lead of the inspection team that they sent to that lab is, you know, one of the people that was funding the gain of function research, has some real conflict of interest there. Right. And you see that coming out, and then you look back 10 months, 14 months, and you look at the demonization of any discussion around it, and you have some questions, right? And I feel like we see that in so many areas, like the lab leak origin theory, hydroxychloroquine, ivermectin, all these things you see where my red flags go up all the time is where they block conversation. You don't want to have conversation around it. And I think this is what I do, right? Like podcasting, I want to have conversation about all these. If it's a tough subject, all the better. Let's have a conversation about it. But it's anywhere you see people shutting down all conversation, you can't even talk about these subjects, there's some funny business going on there. And I feel like that is throughout the pandemic, you see all these different areas where there's just whole areas of it you're not allowed to talk about. And now we're starting to see in all those areas some really fuck shit come out of them. And it's upsetting to me that is what, and I think to go along with that too, is you see these other things that in the grand scheme of things are not that big a deal, but they blow them up and get people fighting over them. And I think the biggest one was masks. There was such an impetus to get everybody fighting over masks, which is so low on the totem pole of things that needed discussion, like throughout this. And I feel like that is just representative of what they are. Of, hey, you know, don't look at what the right hand's doing, look over at the left hand, you know, fight over mass. And there's no conversations about, you know, the fact that they demonized ivermectin as this dangerous drug and said that it was absolutely harmful and we cannot trust this. There's no randomly controlled trials of ivermectin with COVID, and it's dangerous. Even though we have a huge health record going back like 40 years on the drug, it's not that dangerous. But they had to do that because if they didn't, one of the terms of the emergency exemption for the vaccine production was there's no viable treatment, right? And so they had to block ivermectin to get that through. That is scary to me, that they can take
sorry.
Go ahead.
Like that's policy getting in the way.
Exactly. Like, getting in the way of science.
That's not, and again, with masks, like I completely agree. To me, it's such a non-issue. Like,
right?
Like you like to put on a shirt.
Yeah.
Like you're feeling cold, so you put on a shirt. Like you go skiing, you put on a ski mask. Mm-hmm. Like I just don't see why people fought masks so much.
I feel like I'm on the other side of it. Is I completely understand why people fought it tooth and nail, and I completely understand why people absolutely hold it up on a pedestal as, you know, it's the second coming of Jesus. And I feel like this throughout this whole pandemic of all these sides where once I cannot like the left said, I can't even understand how they would even get to that place on the right now. Oh, I get it. And I go right. And they go, I can't even understand how they get to the point on the left. No, it's pretty clear, right? Like if you're being told, and there's all these videos and YouTube videos of people spraying stuff through a mask and right, the particles are smaller than this, like, yeah, that is probably true. And probably most of these masks we're using aren't stopping 100% of particles are getting through. But, you know, droplets, you know, localizing it so that it's not spreading. Viral load, we knew since 2 weeks into this thing that viral load has a huge impact, right? Like how much of the virus do you take in? Did you just get a whiff and passing by? And that was also what was confounding so much at the start was some people were just getting wrecked by this and some people weren't. And it wasn't exactly tied to comorbidities like it was later on. It was, we understood, oh, it's how much of this thing do you get in? But now you understand that and you take that into your framework of what masks are, and you're now blocking viral loads. Now, if you're sitting there having a 10-minute conversation and you catch COVID, but you catch less of it because there was less transfer, that is real, right? Like that is science. Just because the particles are smaller and some can get through, that doesn't change. You know what I mean? Like I feel like that was the biggest example of people just wielding science like it was a sword and just be like, oh, you don't know what you're doing.
Well, because like even you just said, like, even if you think about it, as like you'll just project less and also accept up less if you wore masks. Like,
yeah,
isn't that a good like personal incentive to not get sick?
Yeah, and I think it is. I think people just get so wrapped up in all these other things and the politics around it that they don't care. They don't care.
Yeah, because the politics behind it confuse me.
Oh,
Honestly,
you and me
because I'm
both.
just like there's actual, like it's been tested specifically for this.
Yeah.
And there's lots of evidence that
Yeah.
it just does what it says it was going to do to reduce spread.
Yeah.
And like help keep you safer and not overload our healthcare system.
Right.
Like,
and I think the biggest example I can point to of this, Cole, is the restrictions to outdoor events throughout the entire, the fact that we're still doing that, everyone's celebrating, oh, we can go up to 20 people in Alberta at outdoor events now. It's like, why are we ever restricting it? That was the one thing. There's like almost zero transmission outside, like in all the data over like a year and a half data, almost zero transmission outside. And when you do see it outside, it's at like a music festival where people are like on top of each other. But if you're smart outside, there should be no restrictions. But now when you restrict things artificially just for political reasons to try and show face, you lose all that cachet, all that trust that you've built up with people, because now on something so obvious and now I don't know how any politician can say that they haven't seen, science on it. And it's not just, it's theater. It's theater 100%. And it's so painful to the real cause. And what I look at now is there's these scientists like yourself, maybe I'm using that a little more liberally than I am, but there's these scientists out there that are just, trying their best to build up this trust with people. And it's just being shredded like mad by these politicians making calls without actually listening to the science that is being done. Like that one, that is the one that blows my mind. The fact that we could have been telling people to go outside. Almost the entire idea of what a flu season is just when it gets cold and people go inside and huddle in together. That is pretty much the entirety, right? Like a cold virus doesn't get any stronger in November than it is in fucking August. It's just you're getting less vitamin D, you're more run down, you're inside, you're in tight quarters. So now we know that. And now we're restricting people from going outside and doing outdoor events. If we said you're restricted indoors, but outdoors, let her buck, do it. You still have to be safe, but this would be a completely different 2 years. But just for theater and for politics, it's not there. And now they expect us to trust them on everything else. It's tough. It's tough. I don't know. And that one, like a lot of this doesn't make sense to me, but that is the biggest one right there that I just mentally cannot wrap my head around where they think the public good of that is. I don't know.
Yeah. I mean, the outside stuff definitely concerning.
Mm-hmm.
And I can't really say much else on that.
Yeah.
Because
what do we do about it? It's a political call, right? Like you're very right to delineate the difference between the issues that are issues with science and the issues that are with everything surrounding the science that are making it hard to do it, right? Because that is 100% political, right? The science is there. Anybody can go read it to find out what the science on outdoor transmission is. The fact that these politicians aren't taking it and aren't taking it on themselves, but what gets me is how there's no consequences to all these things. I think time over time we've showed how terribly they've acted at every turn and how wrong they've had it at every turn, but no consequences. They didn't lose a penny.
Well, I mean, this is the power of what democracy is that we've unfortunately, and this is talking pretty broadly, but as a society, we've abdicated responsibility and the need to do things to ourselves, to other people, so that way it becomes less of a mental burden on us.
Yeah.
But if we are true to what democracy is, which is the will of the people, the politicians work for the people. There are way more people than politicians. And so if you don't like something, like, again, it sucks, because if you see injustices, you have to speak up about it and you have to really rally your neighbors. Mm-hmm. And like the only way that you can effectively do that, but you can picket and you can protest, but you can also write letters. You can just, like, if you write a letter about your opinions or facts that you've seen, if you write that letter and you make a template so that way people can just sign their name and address and give to all your friends and ask all of them to send it to your MP.
Yeah. It can have an effect. Yeah.
Yeah. Like that can have legitimate effect on policies that you're seeing.
Right.
Is like, but you have to muster the courage and carve out the time in your day.
Yeah.
To say, look, I'm going to fight the hard fight and do these things for my community.
Mm-hmm. And you do see those people. You do see those people out there. They're rare and they're far and few between. But there have been some pretty brave people throughout this and have been saying these things and are more and more being proven right as more information comes to light. But it's awesome. But that doesn't help them now. It's a nice little pat on the back. Like I said, it's nice to be vindicated on some of these things I've been saying on the podcast. But it doesn't change anything. It doesn't bring anybody back. It doesn't any of those things. But I really liked what you said about the abdication of responsibility. And I just want to take it a step further because I think you really hammered a point there that needs to be said even broader. Because not only do we abdicate our own responsibility for this personal responsibility, the government's just going to tell us what to do. They're going to tell us the rules. We're going to do all that. But then over the past 50 years, well, I'm going to show this example from the United States because they have a clearer system for us. But the same thing happens in Canada. So now, you have these levels of government, right? And you want as much power to be at the bottom of this, right? In your local, you want to be able to go to your mayor and have as much power there to do as much as you want because you want to have control. And that's who you can hold your mayor accountable. He has to be, and he's accountable to you because he sees you at the grocery store, right? Your MP, little less accountable, right? Your prime minister, way less accountable. But now we abdicate our responsibility to the people directly above us, whatever that is. I'm just going to use the mayor but just local government. They abdicate their responsibility. Hey, I don't want to make this fucking decision. And it keeps pushing it up. And it ends up with this huge conglomeration, what we see, right? Whereas you look at this in the United States, the state level used to be the states had so much autonomy to have all these things, but over the years, they have abdicated that upwards all the time. And now what that does is it takes the accountability when that goes up and up and up. And now they're not accountable to anybody, right? They're accountable to this guy who's accountable to this guy. And there's so many layers in between the people, like you said, who are way more numbers and way more power if united, but it insulates them away from it so they can make bad decisions like they are and can absolutely boggle this almost every step of the way with no consequence because that's the system we've built. And that is our fault. That is our fault for just abdicating responsibility and pushing it up, right? That is human. But unfortunately, that's human nature. That's what we do, right? If you don't want to make the cat, but I see that as one of the biggest dangers that we see in, and I feel like almost this pandemic has just shone a light on a big issue that we have of, what I keep telling people is, yeah, this is a pandemic, but this could be a war. This could be something else. This could be what this is highlighting is the weakness of the people that we've elected into power and the leadership that we have and how captured that leadership is by other outside forces. We are just seeing one opportunity of where this all comes to crumble. Life's been really easy for a lot of years and now it's gotten hard. And now we're seeing what the responsibility of that is. Now we need to remember that and start to pull some of this power back and put some accountability back into these places so that when something like this happens again, because it's not if, it's when, it might be a volcano, it might be a solar flare, it might be something else.
Pandemics will become more common. This is not hearsay. This is not fear mongering based on our population and the way that we interact with animals and how we've been grossly misusing antibiotics. And just destroying the environment. Pandemics will happen more frequently over the next century. Yeah. It's just a reality that we now have to deal with. Yeah. And this is just a precursor. Yeah. Admittedly, this is the first major precursor or the first major event. So we have learned a lot from this and are able to inform decisions going forward. Right. So also, I think I'm not excusing politicians, but I think as well, extra caution is reasonable if you're saying hey, we need to make sure I'm not even going to belabor the point more because it's just going to go down the rabbit hole again. All right. Well, go ahead. Yeah. But we just need to, I even forgot what I was saying.
No worries. Hey, I do that all the time, and I have a podcast of my own. Probably I'd say 50% of the episodes has at least one point in me going, I forgot what I was about to say. I do that all the time. But a point in there too, and also not to be a fear monger, but I think this is real, is not only that, I agree with everything you said, that pandemics, for all the reasons you spoke, are we going to become more natural or become more prevalent, but also as things like CRISPR and these technologies become more democratized, and now this ability to, I feel like almost the best thing that's going to come out of this pandemic is people understanding these three words, gain of function research. Gain of function research. I had to do a quick check that was actually three words, because yeah, that is big scary. And it's happening in these big labs right now, and it might leak out. But in 30 years, you can fucking make a virus in your garage with a fucking, computer and a 3D printer, right? Like there, like, I feel like there's, and maybe it's not pandemics, right? And maybe it's not in a garage. Maybe it's
it's not even in 30 years. You can already do it. It's
I was trying to paint a little nicer of a picture, Cole, but I mean, we can go right to it. Yeah, it's coming upon us, and I feel like there's this discussion group I'm a part of on Facebook. It's not a discussion group, it kind of is anyway. And I've had a couple guests on from this group. It's just a bunch of really bright people, and they always throw these taboo subjects and have a conversation about them. And they were talking about this morning about there was some sort of troop movements thing about with China and America right now that I didn't even look into it, but the discussion feed, it was just responding about nuclear. And at the end, I just said, hey guys, like, love the conversations on nuclear. I think it's really important. I've listened to some really crazy podcasts that have really, put me in the mindset of we need to denuclearize as much as possible. That is a risk, but there's probably 30 different technologies that are going to be just as risky as like EMP technology, taking out an electronic grid. Like, you fire an EMP at the East Coast of America, right? Like, it will absolutely cripple, and it will cause way more damage and with way less fallout, right? And which I feel like the nuclear fallout of a nuke is almost the biggest thing, because you can't just, there's so much after effect, but an EMP is not the same way, right? And I'm just throwing technologies out there, a man-made virus, EMP, that, like, these things are real and they're becoming more democratized. And as a whole, we just need to learn the ultimate lesson, like the golden rule, like just the world as a whole needs to learn how not to fight. Cause that's what I was saying to people. Like, we are so far past the point of having two superpowers be able to go to war. And everyone thinks of that within the framework of nuclear technology, but no, we are so far past that if really you wanted, this is something, have you ever heard of Dan Carlin? He's, I
don't think so.
He does these, I mean, they call them podcasts and they're on podcast apps, but they're not podcasts. They're he takes these historical events. Like, I'm just listening right now to this 6-part series on the Japanese theater in World War II. And it is absolutely amazing. It's like 6 episodes, like 4 or 5 hours each of these things. And he just does these incredibly detailed occurrences and takes all these quotes from the people that were really there and really tells a story. He's an amazing storyteller. I can't speak highly enough of him. He's like my favorite guy. And he did one on the Cuban Missile Crisis and how close we came, and how at the very end of the day, it was, the American president and the Russian president both being told by their entire cabinets, they're firing, you need to fire right now, both telling them, yelling at them. And it was only that human condition of what it was that stopped it, and that picked up the phone and told and said, or maybe it was even a letter that they sent. I'm getting goosebumps just thinking about it, but how close we've come. And it's been multiple times. Like, that is worrisome. And to think of just, I love the sentiment of people think, oh, we need to denuclearize and that's going to solve everything. But technology is moving at such a pace that by the time we do denuclearize the world, we found 10 different technologies that cause just as much damage and maybe are even more primed to be the next thing, or maybe might be even more democratized. Because at the end of the day, it's kind of hard to make a nuke in your garage. But like you just said, we're not 30 years away from people to be able to make COVID that we just experienced in a garage and let it loose on the world. We are not that far away from it. And if we don't start learning lessons, if we don't have our wisdom catch up to our knowledge in a hurry, we're going to be in real trouble. And that is what keeps me up at night and keeps me, I feel like people have been looking at me like I'm crazy for wanting to jump into this podcast thing this quickly and wanted to make it something and not just take my time and just let it grow organically. Keep your job. Don't do anything too quick. But it's like, man, like, life is short and it could be shorter. And if you understand all the shit that's out there and all the shit that could change the world in an instant, what do you want to be doing with your life? Like, do you want to be, chasing that dollar and trying to just, be miserable but make a couple bucks? Like, no, do what you love. Like, chase that dream, and like, I feel like that is just so much more important. I feel like this pandemic should be highlighting that for people. And I hope it is, but it should be. I'm curious. Yeah. I'm curious to ask. I mean, before I ask, is anything to say on that topic before I move on?
No, absolutely. Chase your dreams as hard as you can. Honestly, like, we should be implementing systems. This is my opinion, is that we should be implementing systems that allow people to chase their dreams, because that's what the human condition is.
Yeah.
Like, it, quite frankly, all that you have is right now. you have no future, you have no past, because all that you can even conceptualize is literally right now.
Yeah.
Like, and so why would you be doing things that you don't like?
Mm-hmm.
Or admittedly, like you can say, oh, there's a philosophical argument. You do things you don't like, so that way you can have future gains in whatever time frame.
Very Jordan Peterson-esque.
Yeah, but also like enjoy what you're doing right now. You can take a little bit of suffering right now and save it for your future goal, but also don't make your existence suffering right now for the future. Like enjoy your time now. Do what you want. For sure. Like so much as it doesn't harm other people. Yeah. That's the one caveat. For sure. Like honestly, do whatever. I don't care. Just don't harm people that unconsensually, or don't harm people that do not consent to being harmed to, which is most people.
Yeah, most people, eh? That's perfect. And I so agree with that. And I think it's I have a lot of compassion for people that aren't, because there's all these systems. You're right that is the natural human condition to want that, but you are all through high school, all through your K to 12, all through university, they're teaching you the opposite. Don't chase your dream. Go in, get the job, follow this, because for society to function, societies crumble if everybody chases their dream. That's not, who paves the roads, who does that, who, you know what I mean? Like, and understanding that has pushed us so far to this other side of we want minimal dreamers, right? We want to close as many people in the net. Some people are going to squeeze through the net, and those will be the dreamers. Those will be the Elon Musk that really, but those are the people that push society forward, right? In giant leaps. And I think we just need to cut those nets a little bit more. And there's still going to be those jobs, and there's still going to be people that fill those, but more and more with AI. And I feel like if you understand AI, and one of my favorite things is finding the Lex Friedman podcast, an AI researcher, and he just has these brilliant minds in that field and others on, and you really get the understanding of we are in for such a world of change. We have no idea what's coming, and it's already there. It's in your Facebook algorithm. It's in everything. It's in the light. It's in everything already. We just don't realize it yet, but that is going to be such a monumental shift every year moving forward in what jobs are and what things are, that we need to start this momentum of pushing people towards chasing their dreams and not chasing that dollar now, because it's going to force us into that in a while. And if you are, 50 years old and your entire life's work has been now automated. Automated. Thank you. That's the word I wanted. Thanks, Cole. Nice alley-oop. Yeah. If your entire, life work has been automated now, like you need to find what that passion is. And I think it's a lot easier to connect with what your passion is at 25 versus 52, right? I think there's a lot of years and a lot of pain and a lot of, just life that can pile on top of those dreams and make it really hard to dig down to find out and get back in touch with what those are. And I feel like the more you push those things away and keep that fire of your passion burning and aware and a part of you, the easier it is to carry it forward. But that's my worry about that. Yeah, but I'm glad you're on the same page, and we'll get to it. But about kind of how you are transitioning your interests and your schooling into I don't know if it's a dream. I'll have to ask you about it. But before I get to that, I wanted to ask you about when it's January 2020, maybe even December 2019. You're in immunology, so you start to see all these pandemic things start to pop up and all this stuff. This might be an impossible question to ask, because how would you know anything different? But I'm curious to you, how much different was your pandemic experience maybe versus someone like myself? Well, no, not even because someone that has maybe no scientific knowledge, right? Jimmy Welder that, wants his paycheck and loves his family, but doesn't really have an idea. How much different do you think you're having the level of understanding of all this stuff around, and as the information's coming out, did that experience for you?
That's a good question. I mean, I'm definitely in a very lucky position, a privileged position, in that I'm still going to school. Yeah. At the beginning of the pandemic, I was living with a former partner. And so like at the beginning of the pandemic, I definitely felt the same sort of fear, I think, that was common, because it was weird. The university like shut down a couple days before, because they're like, oh, cases are rising and we don't know a lot about it, so we need to kind of hunker down and wait and see what happens, right? Because Like, I think that was a reasonable response, is like,
yeah,
okay,
we need to figure it out.
Yeah, we don't know
100%.
what's happening, so we need to give it some time and see what's actually occurring.
Right.
Like, I recall going, because what day was it? Like March 10th or something, when they announced that everything was going into lockdown, which was really weird because I just like was told I can't go into the university anymore because my research is non-essential because I work on not COVID.
Yeah.
And so I recall that day like very vividly because I'm like, okay, well, I heard it on the radio actually that they're declaring a pandemic. I'm like, oh my God. Okay, so I think what everybody else did at that time, which was go to Costco.
Store.
I didn't, Yeah. Because I'm like, okay, well, I need food for at least 2 weeks because I have faith that the supply chains that we've set up are going to be sufficient for that period of time because I live in Edmonton, like it's in a city.
Yeah.
So went to the grocery store. That was a really weird experience. But as time went on, like, I agree with the caution. And the biggest argument for me is that, or especially during the pandemic, that kind of helped me bide my time, is I was able to do like different projects and figure out different things that I enjoyed doing. But biding my time. With the, I guess, reconciling like the policies put in place, I always understood them from a public health aspect, because our hospitals and our public health in Canada is really awful. Like, they are extremely underfunded, and especially for how much we pay in taxes, our healthcare should be leagues better. It's like, in and of itself, it's almost criminal.
Yeah, it is, right? Yeah.
Like, we don't have, I think we're one of the only nations that has national healthcare that doesn't have subsidized
prescriptions
drugs, like a drug plan.
Yeah.
Like, what the fuck?
Yeah, it is kind of odd. Hey,
but knowing that our health system is impoverished, and there are people that have underlying conditions that they may or may not know about, and people that are just spontaneously getting really sick, and knowing that, like, okay, these restrictions suck and I don't like them. I want to be like, I like to work. I like to work with my hands, like to do things. And so I wanted to do things all this time, but I guess the understanding that I had that, look, this is for everybody. This is a public health good,
right?
To kind of hunker down and wait, really, because if not, then the possibility, and I guess everything looking into the future is a possibility. Nothing is set in stone because there's lots of different things that can happen.
Right.
But the possibility was so high that we just overran our hospitals, and there would then be no more room. Like, we'd have people that needed life-saving surgeries that couldn't have them anymore because the hospitals are full. You would have people that are undergoing, like, say, cardiac arrest, and in any other time they get brought to the hospital.
20 minutes. Yeah,
and it's not a problem, and the hospital is a safe place to go for whatever medical emergency you need. But if there's a highly contagious or even an unknown contagious agent in the hospitals, because that's where you concentrate your sick, because it's easier to have all of your specialists in one place, so that way they can treat everybody there instead of spreading them out. Like, having that possibility of the hospital is no longer a safe place to go if you get sick, or you get injured in something that you have literally zero control over. You could get hit by a car, like
fall down some steps, a million things.
You fall down the stairs, like
fall off a curb. Fuck, I've seen people get hurt falling off a fucking curb before, right? Like, it doesn't take much. We're not as tough as we think we are. We're pretty soft animals in the grand scheme of things.
And like, having that idea of, look, we need to preserve literally what preserves, as a public, it's our responsibility to preserve what is meant for emergencies, to make sure that we have a place that we can go if some godforsaken thing befalls us. Like that was my understanding and kind of what bides me over in like, and I know that some people are frustrated, like in smaller communities, like, oh, I don't see anything here. And it's different in cities. Yes, it definitely is for both of those things. But like, you look at basically India right now, and if we didn't do anything, that was a possibility, a more prominent possibility that could have happened.
Right.
Of people not being able to get into the hospital and dying in the streets.
Yeah. And everything you're saying, Cole, sounds exactly like me for the first month. That was exactly what I thought of. Hey, like you said, we don't know what this is. This is the right call. We need to err on the side of caution. We need to be smart. Same thing. I was very worried. I was one of those people, I was from the root, hey, we need to take this seriously. We're overdue for a pandemic. We've been saying this for years. Like, this is it. Everyone to your battle stations. Let's be safe. Right. And what I found, my fear level went down as more information came out and I got to hear more about it. And what I found was all the research I did on my own and the things I listened to that made me feel better, I didn't hear them anywhere else. And all the things that I could do to protect myself, right? Zinc, and now, vitamin D, zinc, all these things, keratin, that are really, really helpful in your ability to fight the disease. You didn't hear those for probably the first 9-10 months of the pandemic was people saying those. And now, and then I had some growing frustration of, hey, this is what made me feel better about this and my understanding of it. And I feel like they're purposefully holding back these information because they don't. Here's my take on it. I felt like they didn't want people to let their guard down. So they wanted to keep that healthy level of fear up. I really disagree with that. I think they don't understand the power of what fear does, what it does to your immune system, right? Like fear and cortisol and stress, right? Like it absolutely, it's the worst thing you could have. And that was starting to make me a little bit upset. I thought it the same exact way, Cole, of we're throwing around all these metrics of what's important and what's not important. And to me, hospital, how full is your hospital? What capacities is that? That should have been on the front page of the news every day. And that should have been the only thing we go off of. And I always err on the side of freedom, right? And allowing people the freedom and giving them the responsibility and the accountability instead of let's all rely on the government to do this for us. Let's educate us, right? Like, I feel like one of the biggest ones that caused all this fear and uncertainty was this 6-foot rule, right? Which is really a lazy attempt at understanding people of viral load and air capacity and airflow and stuff, because that's saying you guys are too stupid to understand these factors that will actually have you understand how the disease works. And we're just going to put a very easy rule to follow in place. Right. But I feel like that just ramps up the fear, because once you understand the disease and it's not this boogeyman that you don't understand, you just, I just need to stay 6 feet apart and it stays on surfaces for all this time. I was a little upset that they weren't being more forthright and trusting of the people to do the right thing. And what I feel like is obviously, if I had a magic time machine, I could go back and hindsight's 2020. This is bullshit, right? Like I know, but I feel like there is something to be said for a middle ground between what you see in like Texas and Florida and what you see in Canada, where they just let everything wide open, let her buck, right? They have a health system that can take it. They have a whole bunch of different factors that make that a different case study than here. But what I felt like we could have done is showed people the impact of what it is. Hey, we can't have our hospitals overrun. These are our numbers. This is what it is. And you treat it like a forest fire, like we're at amber, we're at this. And instead of saying, we're just going to tell you what it is, and we're going to keep this completely opaque, no transparency at all about why we're making these decisions. We're going to be completely transparent and just say, hey, this is the risk level we're at. You know what? The hospital's at a really dangerous time. Everybody, we're not shutting things down, but we're telling you, this is the time to hunker down. This is be smart. And it puts instead of abdicating all responsibility off of people, puts it onto them, and now it's us responsible for it, and we're taking it on, right? Like very similar to was it Sweden or was it? Might have been Sweden. One of those Scandinavian countries did something kind of similar to this and kind of let things out. They went for herd immunity and they did it, and they had amazing results. And I feel like, comparatively, but I think
that's even. I'm really sorry but
no, go for it.
I know
that's what a conversation
is. About,
yeah.
But like if you look at Sweden compared to Norway, compared to Finland, where Sweden said, you know what, we're not going to mandate masks. That's whatever. We're just going to let it go. Yeah. Like, and at some points in the pandemic, they seem to be doing fine, but overall they have fared actually worse per populace than the other Scandinavian countries, which you can like reasonably compare them against.
But by what metric though? Because I think this is where I was getting to the rest of this is I think a big piece of this is what is frustrating is the metric of success for these countries and these populaces, right? Is cases, right? Like that's the only thing we look at, cases, which is such a meaningless metric. Like when you really understand what this all is, like that completely excludes, mental health. That completely excludes economic health. It completely, doesn't include how full your hospitals are. I feel like all those metrics, and that's what it felt like with all these decisions, is none of that was taken in. And even if they were, because of the lack of transparency in what the rules are, you don't know, are they thinking these things, right? Like the children's helpline has been ringing off. There's these metrics that you see of this real pain that is being seen, but it seems like in an effort, because they know the only thing they're being judged on, the only thing that is being bandied about that we should care about is case numbers. That's all they care about. They don't care about economics. They don't care about, mental health and all these other things and all the stress that go along with it. Or maybe if they aren't showing it, right? Like and that's what it seems. And I think that's a position that we put ourselves in by the expectations on our politicians, because we set that if all we care about is case numbers and that's what that's all they're going to tailor to, and they're going to make it so that, let's lock everybody down. If the cases go down, I don't care if the economy collapses, I'll look like I was good because my cases were low, right? Like, not to say that's actually what happened, but that's the far side of taking that line of thinking to the extent of where it could go, right? Like that was my frustration of this is like, hey guys, there's other factors at play here and we need to be upfront about them, right? And then you can have a well-educated and, together society, right? That is in this together, and is not just this fighting and this absolute, because that's the other piece of this is the response and the what they did choose to do brought forward so much hatred and so much, infighting and so much separation, so much division in a time where you need people to be coming together and getting through this together, that I was just like, man, this could be done so much better in so many different ways. Yeah.
I want to address that.
Yeah. So I hit you with a fire hose there.
Yeah. The metric that I'm referring to is like just population deaths per capita.
Yeah.
So that metric was what I'm was referencing for Sweden. But I completely agree that all of these other things need to be considered as well, and they were not considered well enough.
Yeah.
Like I'm in no way excusing the government for their mismanagement. Like in no way am I advocating for that at all. And I just want to make that clear for you and people that are listening too. Because like the government needs to be held more accountable, really. And it needs to be doing a much better job, specifically mental health, economics. It needs to really fuck out of the economy. Like let the economy do what it will and stop propping it up. It's going to suck.
Yeah.
It's going to suck, but it needs to happen.
It sure does. I think when you look what the response was is drop interest rates to zero. And I know so many people that went and bought a house right now that can't afford it. And I'm like, what are you doing? And how do you not see this? We've been through this before. Do you remember 2008 people? Do you remember this? We're doing the exact same thing now. Like what is going on? Right. But, go on.
Like the mental health epidemic that has been here continually.
Was here long before and is here long after.
Yeah. Like, and just the exacerbation of it, like the drug abuse epidemic that is as well, like opioids. I don't know exactly. Like the opioid epidemic in Canada is bad, but
real bad.
I don't know. I don't know exact state or like statements as to how bad it was. But like all of these type of metrics, yes, we need to come together as communities to do this. And there needs to be transparent communication, which the government is not doing, which like it sucks because I've thought about this too. And the only solution I can think of, which is again, a really difficult solution, is you need to gather your neighbors and say, look, we may not agree on everything, but can we at least agree on this one point that the government needs to be doing better and needs to be accountable for us and doing things for us. Like the government's job is to work for the people. Like
it used to be. Well, now they work for the people that get them elected and whoever donates the most to the campaign, right? Like,
like,
but I see where you're going for sure.
Yeah. Like in a democracy, that's your responsibility as a democratic citizen, is to hold your government responsible.
Yep.
And it's difficult, and I don't want to do it. Like,
I hear you.
I'm busy doing my own things, but it's a poor excuse. Like in reality, if you look at it, it's like, what's the ultimate thing that you really want? Are you okay with abdicating your responsibility to other people so that way you can kind of live carefree, or are you going to shoulder the heavy load and be responsible for yourself?
Very
I know, not for example, but like Jordan Peterson talks a lot about that in all of his writing.
For sure.
Super good. That's, I think, resonates well with me, at least.
Yeah.
Like, it's about personal. Your life is, you can only know your life.
Yeah.
And you need to be responsible for it. Like,
yeah. No,
the government's been doing a bad job.
Yeah, they have. And we've been, and when you look at it through the lens that you just showed, we're doing a bad job because we're not holding them responsible. And what I see is the trap that it falls into. But here's where I think rubber meets the road is now we are so inculcated and so brainwashed into this idea that of this, I know it's not a two-party system in Canada, but essentially effectively it is, right? Like, and even if there is like a third party, it's the issues of what makes a two-party system bad are very much alive and well in what this is. It's captured by interest groups, right? Like the actual democracy has been captured, right? That is the issue you have. So I see so many people right now, all my university friends are all just blaming Jason Kenney. All of COVID is Jason Kenney's fault. Jason Kenney has had like slightly different, but almost identical. Like when you look at the US and you look at, Ron DeSantis in Florida versus Gavin Newsom in California, that is two vastly different programs and plans and different outcomes. You look at BC, Alberta, Saskatchewan, Manitoba, the differences in their responses are so minimal. It's almost the exact same plan for everybody. How can you say, and all these different parties and all these, how can you say it's Jason Kenney? It's because the conservatives are in power. Every fucking government has fucked up almost just as hard as every other one, from top to bottom. Each one of these parties, they're all captured and they're all in the self-interest of, Walmart and Costco and not the people and what's best for us. So obviously it's never been so cut and dry and purely put in front of us as it has right now. And people need to wake up to that fact, but to just blame one side or the other, right? They're all the same. They're all just as fucked. They all care about you equally. Fuck all, right? Like they all give zero fucks about you in equal amounts, right? Whether you're liberal, conservative, for the most part, they're all captured by the same people. And that is why I just feel like that's such a lazy way out of this. It's just, oh, well, that's the trap of, we'll get them out next and we'll get the other guys in this time. Pandemic happens in 4 years and we have, every province that has either conservative or liberal just flip flops so that when the next pandemic hits, we are going to be in this same position. It didn't change anything, right? Like, unless somebody actually goes in that wants to make a change and actually wants to recapture the democracy for the people, right? Like with a, maybe a grassroots party that, unfortunately, this is what tried to happen in the US, where Bret Weinstein, the evolutionary, he came up with this idea called the Unity Project, where you take one guy from the left, one guy from the right. They flip a coin for who runs for president and vice president. And that 4 years they switch and they run with the other one, and it brings everybody together. And what did they do? They shut down their YouTube page. They shut down their Twitter page. They absolutely attacked it because that is an attack on the system, right? That perpetuates all this stuff, and you see what happens. And it's very clear and very obvious. But so many people, like you said, they just want to live their own life. They don't want to be part of this fucking revolution of recapturing our democracy. You walk out on the street, you go to West Edmonton Mall, and you say, "Who wants to recapture the democracy with me?" You know what? You're going to be pretty lonely out there, right? Like nobody wants to do this shit, but it's so important that people should. And that was my frustration of just sitting here, pulling my hair out at my house every day and realizing, well, I'm not doing nothing. And that's why I started this podcast. If I can't talk all this shit and then not actually, try and back up and try and make change and try and bring these ideas forward to people that maybe never heard of them, right? Or maybe never put all the pieces together, because it's very much designed so that you don't put everything together and you keep everything, in its separate little compartmentalized areas, so you don't see the whole mechanism for what it is. And that's all it takes, is somebody to lay it out like I am right now. Do you see what's happening with all these things and how they all fall together? And it's pretty obvious once you see it, but it's unfortunate that there's that much money in holding people from seeing it, right? And it would solve so many of the problems, probably the last things we talked about the last 2 hours. So much it would be solved just by that alone, right? Bringing that accountability in that, having the democracy be accountable to the people again, right? Like that, regaining that would change everything. But that is it. Probably the hardest thing we could do. It's tough. I don't know what I don't know what the next best move to get there is, and I just going to keep talking about it on here and keep bringing it up and waving that flag, and hopefully maybe in a couple of years it'll grow to a movement and people will hear about it and they'll make a change. But I don't know.
Well, as well, it's difficult because it's an ideal that's bigger than you, and you're probably honestly not going to see any fruits of your labor.
Probably not.
Like,
yeah,
like it's a long play.
Yeah, it sure is. It sure is.
But at the same point, like, it is important, but I think as well that there are, like, to bring this back to like the internet, there are people and the ability to connect people throughout the world.
Yes. And
across countries and states and territories and wherever.
You're so right.
And there is now a burgeoning movement of, like, before, when the internet was first starting out, when we were young, the internet was anonymous. And now it is no longer anonymous. You are very much tracked.
Oh, hell yeah.
But you can also use that to your advantage. The reason why you can use that to your advantage is because you can be consistent with what you're saying. You can consistently say, if you're going to be kind and empathetic and like genuine to people, that's now currency. Because people can look back on that and say, look, this person's not full of shit. They're not doing it just because they're not doing it to posture.
Yeah.
This is who they are. Yeah.
And then you can take and this is a poor way to make this. I was going to say you can weaponize that, but that puts it in a different context of what I don't want to do, because it's a more beautiful thing than that. It's not a weapon. You can, right? Like, I totally agree with that. And what brought me to that realization, Cole, was seeing podcasts and seeing these people that start podcasts and are so much themselves that it is a pure record of what they are, over hours and hours of what it is. And now that's that person, right? That is you take it. And that could be a YouTube channel. That could be a Twitch stream. That could be all these things where you are now saying, you're staking your claim of, hey, this is who I am. And this is, like you say, and then people can resonate with that, and they can come along for that journey. And it's so cool to see what the internet has done. And I want to just bring it back to that Unity project again, because before they shut down the YouTube page and shut down the Twitter, maybe they never shut down the YouTube page. I think it was just the Twitter page, because I think Bret was doing it from his personal YouTube page, so they didn't shut that down. But before they did, it was gaining steam and it was bringing together such amazing people. And they were doing these things called bonfires, where they would do a live YouTube and they'd bring on some patriotic person, and there's people from around the world are tuning in to see these ideas and talk about, recapturing the democracy and what it was. And it was, it gives me goosebumps just thinking about it, like how amazing that was for that couple of weeks. And they're also up on YouTube. If you look up Unity Project Bonfires, you'll see the ideas that they're talking about, and how, it almost brings me to tears just thinking about how beautiful that was. But then to add to that, to see it cut down, and the whole time saying they are not letting this happen, because it was getting closer and closer. So the plan was to actually get those people onto a ballot and get them actually into the race and have it be a groundswell, because they knew if we did this too early, they would just cut it out, which they ended up doing anyway. They thought they would time it right. But if you do it too late, you don't have enough time for the groundswell. So it was all this timing game, and it was growing and growing and growing. And then they cut the legs out of it right at the end. And it was so sad to see, but it really gave me hope of, hey, they came pretty close. Like, for what they did, of what they tried to do, they got pretty far. And, with the internet, if you learn the lessons from that and come back together. And that's what Bret was saying after the fact of, it may not have, like, if you look at it empirically of what their goal was to, they saw Biden, they saw Trump, and they said, these are terrible options. They're both captured. They both do not have our interests at hand. We want to put something else in. This is the call. If you look at it that way, they failed, right? One of those two guys won, they failed. But what he was talking about is they really didn't, because all the people that brought in, and all the connections that were made, and the list of these really patriotic people that want to have a change, that really truly believe in what it is and believe in the spirit of what they're going for, those people all came together, and they all are now collaborating. And now on the next one, they're going to be more organized. And I just thought that was so beautiful to look at it through that lens of that call to arms of people that see the issues at hand and want to make a change. They brought those people together. And now next time there's an army of them, right? I'm one of those people. I was all in on it. I believed in it quite deeply. and it was sad to see it go. But there's so much, like when you talk about the power of the internet and what it can do and who it can bring together and what change is available, it'll knock your socks off what it can do. And that's just, we're never going to know what that big change is, but these big corporations and big power structures that seem untoppable, who knows? Maybe the internet throws a sidewinder at them, right? Like something like Bitcoin or something like these absolutely game-changing technologies that shake up the whole game and really maybe even the playing field a bit. That's what excites me, and I think is going to happen some point in the future, but we'll never know what it's going to be. It's going to be something we never see coming.
Yeah. I mean, I agree with a lot of what you said. Like, it's not that you lost once. It's that you have learned from your experience, and you're ready to move forward with it, which like is something that, I mean, realistically, if you look at it in terms of a power struggle, you could say, okay, that makes sense. You want to disincentivize people from trying again, but ultimately just say, fuck it and do your own thing and say, look, I failed, but I'm going to learn from it and I'm going to do it again better next time.
Yeah. Well,
like
sorry, go ahead.
That's the end of my thought there.
All right. Well, I was going to say, speaking of saying fuck it and doing it on your own, I'm curious to ask about your YouTube page, because this is something like we kind of mentioned at the start, we were in Lister for a year together, right? And then kind of went off our own paths and had connected, but then reconnect over the last, I don't know, when did you start? Because I started to see these posts that you're making. They're very scientific and very interesting. And I'm just curious, how did that get started? Was that something you want to do for a long time? And maybe just give the listeners an idea of what it is and where they can find it.
Sure. So I'll try and answer those questions sequentially. So my YouTube channel is called Investigate, Explore, Discover. Okay. And I started it at the end, like the very end of December in 2020. And so I kind of had the idea, because I've been in academia for such a long time. And I saw, I guess, the general disillusionment of the public and the loss of trust in the scientific method and what it means, and even the ability to look at it with any sort of modicum of understanding. I felt like I've been in this situation for such a long time, and I'm by no means an expert, but I've gathered enough experience to feel confident in my ability to look at source information and relay what is going on in that source. And so I guess when it started like September-ish of 2020. I was like, oh, okay, well, I see this huge problem that academia does not care about the rest of the world. It's a very ivory tower place.
Yeah.
And
by design.
And like, maybe people are there, like, so I've read tons of scientific papers, and scientific papers can be god awful boring to read, very difficult to read, and like penetrate the information, parse out the information of what's there. And it's very inaccessible, and it's inaccessible by design, but also by situation. Like, it's a combination of both.
Yeah, for sure.
And so I was seeing that, and I was getting kind of frustrated, because I'm like, well, science is meant to be for everyone. It's meant to be shared with everybody for free. And because it's literally just beneficial to have this information out there for people to understand it, understand intrinsically what that information is and how it is beneficial. Yeah,
where the value is.
Yeah. And so I thought about it. I kind of talked with some of my peers about it, and I'm like, hey, what would you think about listening to like a 10 to 15 minute summary of a scientific paper? Because in grad school and my undergrad, for my program, we did a lot of paper discussions and things called journal clubs, which you take a scientific journal's article and you really analyze it and see what's wrong with it, what's right with it, like the findings it made and why it's important. And so I was like, okay, well, the journal articles or the presentations that I'm seeing at the university are really boring, and they're an hour long, and I can't sit through an hour-long presentation because I lose focus. Like, it's too much. And you only see it once as well. And you kind of have to hope that your audience remembers everything all the way through. And so I was like, well, it doesn't really seem like the best idea for me. And the fact that it's only for like this high level audience isn't like, it's important to still have that for the high level audience. So that way you can get the higher level thought, but also like it needs to, I think it not needed to be available to
democratized a little bit.
Yeah. Like to everyone.
Yeah.
And so with that, I'm like, okay, well, I think it'd be a fun project to try and see if I can do that.
Mm-hmm.
And so I took one of my presentations that I did to my department 2 years ago now, like a year and a half. So I took one of those presentations. I had already made it. I completely redid it to be more generalized for an audience. So I have like half of it is background. So that way it gives context to exactly what is going on.
Right.
And so I recorded that. I recorded it after like kind of putting it off for a month, and then I recorded it, and then I meant to look at it, and I meant to look at it, and then another month went by.
Yeah.
Because I'm like, I just don't want to see myself on camera.
Oh, I know all about it. I know all about it, my friend.
Like it's difficult to see yourself on camera and kind of critique yourself and go through it. So I was putting that off. But I ended up editing it and formatting it in a way that I'm like, okay, this seems pretty interesting, or at least as a passable presentation.
Yeah.
And so then I just kind of put together a YouTube channel for that and started posting them. Started posting, so I look for articles that are free for one, because fuck science paywalls. That's nonsense.
Yeah, I agree.
So I look for free articles, and I look for things on immunology because I'm comfortable talking about that.
Yeah.
Because I feel like I have a wide enough knowledge base that I'm able to convey those terms.
Yeah.
Or that sort of information. And then, look for topics that I think are interesting to look at for a little bit and convey to other people.
Yeah.
And it's meant for like, I feel like I need a better way to say this than non-specialist audiences, because it's like, I want to say general audiences, but also you need to like, there's a little bit of prerequisite biology knowledge that like, I just assume that people that are watching have, so it's not completely general audience.
It's perfect for me. I have somewhat of a background, not specifically trained in it, but I understand like the science of it to understand what you're saying. Like, it's not, you can never take high level science and dumb it right down to plain English, but you can do your best, right? And you'll find that middle ground that it may be available to, 1% of the population. Even if you take that from 1% of the population to 5, you are still having 5 times more accessibility to this really good information, right? Like that is a huge, admirable goal. And that's why I think it's so important, and why it was so cool, and why I tried to support as much as I could. Hey, that's cool. Keep doing it. Right? I always try and be that guy when people are chasing something cool or chasing a dream. I'm always, send them a DM, chase after it, go for it. Like you said earlier, I really liked what you said about, being that person. I feel like that's something on this podcast talking about, and trying to be that person that supports this type of thing and tells people to chase their dreams. It makes me in my real life, when I see someone doing it, now I have that. I'm that guy that supports people to do this. I have to, reach my hand out and say, hey, if you need a hand, right? Like, I know probably 3 or 4 different people that we went with in Lister, and I barely knew them, but I see them start a podcast. I'm going to reach, hey, you need any help? You need this, right? Sorry to distract, but I think that is one of those things that's important to foster that, because it is such an important goal to bring the science to people that need it. Yeah.
And so I guess a better way is it's more common language, and it's trying to be more understandable through a kind of semi-classic. It's not, I can't even say semi-classical. It's a PowerPoint presentation that I make.
Yeah.
And then I put my face on the side of it. So that way it's like you're listening to somebody explain something to you. It's not, it's kind of a lecture, but it's not meant to be just a straight lecture. It's meant to be like, hey, I'm explaining something to you. And I try and use some humor or something, try and use some humor to at least make it a little bit interesting to people that are just listening to it. And so, I summarize the major findings that they did, or that they found in that paper. I highlight why it's important, why you should care, and give some thoughts on to future directions that I think that research could go on, or should be addressed.
That's really cool. What's maybe our first question? How many have you done so far?
I think I've done I can't remember if it's 13. I think it's 14. I've done 14 so far. And so I release them on a bi-weekly basis because I just don't have time
Fair enough.
to do it otherwise. Like it's more than a part-time job that goes into doing this YouTube hobby.
Oh,
really.
Tell me about it. Those hobbies that take up 9% of your time, they'll get you. They will get you. Of those 14, which one is your favorite so far?
Which one is my favorite? That's
picking children.
That's a good question. There's things that I like about all of the presentations that I've done. So that's really difficult to say which one is my favorite.
Or maybe even just one that stands out to you that maybe you thought was important, or that maybe that people came to you and said that they really enjoyed or got something out of. I just maybe want to maybe get you to kind of go through the process of one of them, just so that people can kind of get an idea of what it's like if they want to check one
out. So one that was like, I like all of them. One that was really impactful for one of my friends, because I reviewed a paper that looked at B cells in breast cancer. And B cells are an immune cell that you have that make antibodies, which are essential for having long-lasting immunity. And so I did that on breast cancer, and she came up to me and said it was very, it touched her deeply because she had to have a lump. She found a lump in her breast and had to have it removed. And so it was like touching that I also went over that. I know as well, I got a lot of support for investigating a newly found and researched drug for rheumatoid arthritis.
Oh, cool. Wow.
I got a lot of really positive community engagement from that.
Well, that's awesome. That's awesome.
And so, I do it on really whatever topic.
Whatever catches your eye. Yeah. No, and that's the best part. I think especially in things like YouTube and things that people are pushing, if you make that the metric for what guides you is just what interests you, you're going to find success, because I think so many people fall into that trap of what do people want to see? And they get off their own track to try and chase all these other ones, and they never find anything. You're never actually digging in, and you're not building something. You're just wandering all over the place trying to find something, right? Like, I feel like if you just chase what's interesting, just like this podcast, doesn't matter. There's no rhyme or reason or theme really throughout of the random people I'm having on, but it's just, am I interested in them? Yes, I'm going to have them on. And eventually I believe that that's going to pay off in the future, right? I think it's a slower process that way. I think there's a lot of quick fixes of just, hey, there's a community that wants to see this, right? Like I can, it'd be really easy to take some right-wing rhetoric and just say that on the podcast every day and know that there'd be a fan base that grow, but it's not long-term what you're going to get. And I think if you just keep chasing that of what interests you, you're going to find some real success with it. How much enjoyment do you get out of the process of it? Like, do you love doing it? Is it something that even if nobody watched it, would you still be doing it?
Yes.
Yeah.
I do enjoy doing it.
Yeah.
Like, it's fun. It tests me in my ability to communicate science, because that's something that I know growing up, I didn't have great communication skills. And so that was something that I wanted to particularly foster, and especially doing science, like the communication is key. And if you can't, unfortunately, you can know a lot of things, but if you can't communicate it well, it gets lost in the noise.
And I don't know if this is just maybe the years that have separated the conversation we've had, but your communication skills are, vastly improved. Like this conversation, I even noticed I wasn't going to say nothing unless maybe you brought it up, but I think that's awesome. And to recognize that as a goal, I think that's very, I think so many people would not even have the self-awareness to recognize that they'd even have that within themselves. I feel like that is impressive on its own, but that's awesome that helps you in that way too, because that is going to pay dividends in whatever you do, right? Whatever job you get, that communication is the key to everything, man. Like, it's awesome. That's what I find with this. This podcast might not one-to-one equate to me being better at my other job, but to learn how to communicate with people and read people and have conversation, that can't hurt. Like, it might not be perfectly attributable, but it can't hurt, right? It's going to help a little bit. And I feel like that is so amazing to have something that is a passion that you love, that you enjoy doing and benefits you, right? Like that's the golden ticket. If you can find that, whatever that is in your life and with your passions and all that, if you can find something like that, you are just off to the races, because you are now have a really efficient use of your time that makes you happy, betters you as a person, right? All those things. And maybe eventually can make you a little bit of money, right? Like that's the real end goal of it. If you can find all this stuff to chase all the right reasons and eventually it makes some money, oh man, would that ever be good? Hey,
Yeah, that would be awesome.
You and me both. You and me both.
But yeah, like I don't know what else to say. I like doing it. I think it's interesting. If you want, I guess, as like a more of a plug, like if you want to experience or like see what is actually in miscellaneous science paper, or if you want to tell me what you want to see, that would be cool too.
Yeah, for sure.
Like I keep saying, I'm like, hey, anybody that's listening, what do you want to hear? And all I hear back are crickets. And like,
hey, man, I say that at the end of every one of these episodes. Hey, who do you want to see me have on? Crickets. I'm right there with you. And then every once in a while, you get somebody that runs into you and that gives you a great recommendation. But yeah, if anybody's listening to this and either has a paper or has a topic, send it Cole's way and let him dig into it. I feel like that's also super cool when you have something that where you give a recommendation, then you get to see it brought to life. I feel like that is also a super cool thing to do as well. I'm curious because what I found with this podcast of doing this is I've learned so much about myself in chasing this and learning this. Have you found that in doing that, have you learned anything about yourself and kind of pushing yourself and out of your comfort zone with it?
I've learned that I enjoy doing the science communication. I enjoy engaging with people about like what science, like what the science is and what it says, and not like it being solely just that. It's not anything in regards to anything else. Like I know I've run into not obstacles, but definitely hiccups because I made one video on the effects of vaping on your lungs. Like I vape, I enjoy it. It's fun. Like I like the feeling, but it's not good for you. Like really putting anything into your lungs is not good for you. And I'm like, okay, well, it is much better in terms of consuming nicotine. It is much better than smoking. Right. Like there's hands down no argument between vaping and smoking, but between vaping and not vaping, there's a pretty clear gap. Like may not be the best for you in the long run. So I got a lot of flack for that in particular because people are like, how dare you say something about that? How dare you say that vaping can be harmful for you? Like, how dare you say anything bad about it? And I'm like,
really?
I'm not even saying it. I'm just relaying information.
I'm just reading the science here. Yeah. Go talk. There's the authors of the paper right here. Go take your complaints up with them. I'm just relaying, shooting the message.
Yeah. I'm like, I'm not even coming up with these results.
Yeah.
Like, I just don't know what I was confused, but also I'm like, you're putting words into my mouth. I'm not saying that vaping is good. I'm not saying vaping is bad. I'm saying that it causes things to happen in your lungs.
Yeah. Yeah.
Like, again, like a tool.
Yeah. Like, but people will find something to complain about. If they can't find it one place, they'll go looking in another.
And
I'm curious if you've ever heard of a guy named Andrew Huberman.
No, I've not.
No? Oh, you should check him out. He is a research. Who is he with? Oh, one of the main universities down in the States, but he is an amazing communicator of science. And does very similar things where he takes maybe less so like specific papers, but ideas like he'll take sleep and go through the real deep science on it. He's an amazing reader. He's actually been on Joe Rogan and Lex Fridman a couple times, and those are amazing podcasts. You want to check him out. He's just he's what you wish every scientist was, right? In terms of his communication skills, his love for the subject matter. I think you would really enjoy him. And if you check him out, I think you might even, just find a few little things you can steal too, which is what I always love. I feel like people have such a taboo about that, but like, if you think someone's doing something awesome and it's in a similar vein and you can take something from it, take it, right? Like this podcast is 100% a rip from Joe Rogan and Lex Fridman and Eric Weinstein and Bret Weinstein and all these people, right? It's a giant amalgamation. And I'm so proud to say that, right? Like I got Lex Fridman right here above my head, right? Like I want that to be, and I want to be open about that. Like, yeah, it is a rip off of these things because that's my passions. And I want to take a piece of all those people and the best things I enjoy of all these things and bring it forward to people and make the best product that I can. And maybe if you don't have time to listen to Joe Rogan, Lex Fridman, all these people in your day to day, you can just listen to one podcast and you know that he's listened to all these other ones and can at least give you a little piece of each of them, right? Like that's kind of my mindset with it. And you can just kind of go from there, but definitely check him out. And everyone listening, check out Andrew Huberman. Even his following on Instagram, you pick up amazing pieces of science, and not just like pieces of science, but he's very focused on actionability. Like he's going to teach you science that actually you can bring into your day-to-day life and make it actionable. And that is awesome. I feel like that is very well needed out there. And he's one of those guys that I'm sure you'll love. I'm so excited now. I feel like I'm going to get a text from you tomorrow, but holy shit, I love Andrew Huberman. We'll see. We'll see.
No, I'll definitely take a look at that. Like I just have to put it into what I'm doing.
Yeah,
like
for sure. I think that's all that I had to ask you about. But the one thing I am curious about, just selfishly, I think, was so when you first came to Lister and you were first year, I was in my second year, and that was kind of my responsibility. As when you live in Lister, you're the responsibility for all the first years on the floor, and you take care of them. You make sure they don't get into too much trouble and that they learn the ropes and stuff. And I was a big man on campus that year because I was an LDL exec, right, running the dodgeball league, and I thought I was hot shit. And looking back on it now, I cringe thinking about that. But I'm just curious, as a first year coming in and seeing this wild man that was me in my second year, what did you think of me that year? Like, were you just like, who is this fucking idiot, this caveman, or what? Because I feel like me and Kyle in that wing where we lived up till 4 or 5 in the morning doing God knows what almost every night had to have been quite the scene.
Well, I mean, I wasn't perfect in first year either.
None of us.
Like I was out till like 2 or 3 to 4 every morning anyway.
Yeah,
like
that is true. You were right in there with us. Yeah. Doing a little different things sometimes, but same kind of thing. Yeah.
Like I was out and about and doing things all the time as well. Like, to be honest, like I just thought you were doing your thing. I didn't really.
All right.
Think
well,
like
I'm glad. I felt like I was just bracing myself for some bad stories to come out of just all the shit you got to see.
Well, like we just hung out in different cliques. That's just what it was.
Yeah.
Like there's nothing inherently bad or good about that. That's just what it was. Like we interacted a little bit, but we didn't interact a lot.
But what I loved about it though too was we all kind of had our own little groups too, but when we did come together, that was a fun group. Like that wing, even just that guys wing along, the girls were great too, don't get me wrong, but that just little guys wing we had, like for how eclectic mix that was of just super different people. I don't think there was, maybe me and Kyle were probably the most, but even me and Kyle are super different, right? Like it was just such an eclectic mix, and how well we actually meshed together and had fun together was so cool to see. And just, the mix of all those different personalities and that it can mesh that well. It was pretty fun to watch. I loved that year. And I, looking back, I loved every year of Lister, but that year that we had on that floor and paired with 8 for dodgeball and that 7-8 Henday we had, like that group was so much fun. I look back on that so fondly for that year. Oh, just, I knew it was going to be a bit of a memory lane hopping on, just seeing your face again. Oh.
Yeah, no, like it was fun. Yeah. I completely agree. Like as a big group together, I think we meshed well. There wasn't, really conflict.
Yeah, it was nice, hey? Which is saying something when you have 40 people that get along that well. Like usually there's a little bit of, a few spikes of conflict here and there, and we're probably looking at it with rose-colored glasses back on it, and there probably was a little bit of it, but it's just so much fun to look back on that with such fondness, and hopefully that kicked your university career off right, having that that experience with us hooligans there. Oh, that's fun.
Can I flip that back on you? Because I don't get a lot of, I came in to Lister out of Calgary knowing no one.
Yeah.
And I came late too. Like, what was your impression of me, I guess, throughout the year, but also?
Yeah, I always thought you were bright, and you were trying to find the right way to say it. I felt like you always I feel like what I value in people and what I respect in people is having a viewpoint and standing for anything, right? It doesn't matter what you stand, just you got to stand for something. I felt like you always had a viewpoint, and you weren't scared to speak up. Like, not that you were, the jumping on people, stomping down their throats to make sure that they saw your point, but when it was brought to you, you always had a viewpoint. And I always appreciated that, right? And you could tell that you had a certain spark of, I'm struggling for the right word of what it is, but I feel like it's also very much what I talk about on this podcast about the through point with all the guests is a certain spark of something that, I feel like it's so easy to just be a mannequin or an automaton, right? Where you're motivated by something else, something external to you, and you're not motivated, but you're motivated by everything around you, what everyone's telling you to do, right? And I don't know if you've ever read Ayn Rand, but in the Fountainhead, they talk about second-handers and first-handers, right? That difference. And I feel like I always recognized you as a fellow first-hander, right? Like I could see that you were not just wanting to take in what everybody else was. And I feel like that's where I'm always on the look for. They're few and far between, those people within societies, but you can kind of pick them out. They always stick out like a sore thumb when you can see them. And that was my biggest impression. And why, when I saw you start that YouTube channel, I was like, oh, that's probably going to be pretty good. Like I recognized you, and I recognized you have that spark or whatever that is that's you need to be successful in a thing like that. That's why I was jumping right to support you right at the start. Like, hey, keep doing it. That's awesome. I support it. Right. Like that's more or less what I remember. And I mean, probably a couple other things, a few nights of fun that I remember that stick out. Maybe we'll keep between us that we had, right? That's all the good things. And I just remember I am a very loyal person, and I look out for my people. And I feel like always throughout Lister, after my first year, even in first year, like my floor and my crew, I was so defensive of you guys. And, you were almost like my children, right? So I have that. So I also have a very fond memory of all you guys coming in. And it's so funny to think that that's 1 year difference, right? Like you were coming in 1 year after. I had 1 year ahead of you guys in school, but it feels like such a monumental thing of I already know all the ropes. I know all the buildings and all that stuff. So it was fun for me. That was probably one of my favorite parts of the whole Lister experience, was that exact thing of being able to be that person for other people and bring them in and show them the ropes and make sure that they have a good time, right? Like I feel like some of those nights where we just partied with our floor and seeing, oh, you guys have such a good time with whatever we were doing was so much fun for me. And I enjoyed that. That's yeah, I think that probably sums it up pretty good. Anything else?
Yeah.
Anything else that we talked about before that we were going to chat on here? I think we covered pretty much the whole thing. I was maybe the only thing I didn't ask you what was your rugby career, but maybe we'll leave that for the next time you come on. And next time we'll have to do this in person, not on Zoom.
Absolutely. Hopefully we can do it in a time frame when I'm still in Alberta.
I know that's what I was actually just thinking that, but I have big plans to go out, out east, west, like once I get this podcast to a little bit more of right. Like I want to go to Toronto and record, 6 or 7 episodes with all my Toronto people, right? Go to Vancouver, record out there. So wherever you end up, I'll be there. I'll come track you down. You think you're getting away from me that easy, Cole? Not a chance. Not a chance. I'm going to track you down and we'll do this again.
Excellent.
Sounds good. Well, thanks again. That was so much fun. And we'll definitely do this again soon. Thanks for that discussion. Yeah. I feel like that was the discussion around COVID that I wanted to have with somebody, but it always turns into either me just talking at someone and them just like backing right down, or, something else. I feel like that was polite and showing people that you can have discussion on this and you can come to these boundaries, and there's a way to do it. Doesn't mean that it's so taboo you can't have a conversation. I think it's gonna be powerful. I think people are going to really enjoy seeing that. So thanks again, Cole. That was awesome.
Well, thank you, Nick. I really appreciate you coming, or you inviting me on, and like your support. It's been fantastic. Like I look forward to seeing what else you do. Like I feel like there was something more eloquent I was going to say.
That's all good. That's
like no, I'm looking forward to like seeing how your podcast progresses as well. It's awesome. Going to be cool. I like listening to them too. So
I appreciate that. That makes me feel good. Awesome. Thanks, brother. All right, talk to you soon.
Thanks.
All right, episode 45 in the books. I hope you guys enjoyed that one. It was a really fun discussion. Nice to catch up with Cole and have this type of discussion with somebody that's going to push back against me. I feel like I'm just going around all the time, soaking in all this knowledge and doing all this research around this, and I don't really have anyone that can argue it back to me and force my position to get sharper, because I feel like I'm coming up against really weak arguments, to be frank with you guys. And this was awesome. Cole, had some really, really good insight in a lot of these areas and had the expertise to really push me to that next level of knowledge. And like I said in the intro, I wish I could have had all that other information that came out the next day after we recorded this at my disposal to get Cole's take on it. But I'm sure Cole will be hopping on tons over the next couple of years and spreading some really great information. So go to his YouTube page, Investigate, Explore, Discover, and check him out. I think he's an interesting cat. I always really enjoyed his viewpoint, and he stands up for what he says. I think he, for my money, maybe a little bit too close to the academia at this point, but how can you blame a guy when he's fucking right in the middle of it, still doing the school? You kind of have to take on a bit of that mindset to get through it. And I think once he goes out into the real world, he's going to have a really sharp balance of questioning, but knowing the status quo and knowing how to work through it. I think he's going to be doing some really exciting things, and I'm excited to see it. I hope he keeps going with that YouTube page, because I think that's a great idea. The more people that democratize science in that way, the better off we are as a society. So he's going to keep on rocking. I'm going to keep on rocking. All of you listening, you guys keep on rocking. I don't know why I'm into the rock today, but we are. Yeah, other than that, if you have any guest suggestions, anything you'd like to see, send them my way. Any feedback, anything you've enjoyed or not enjoyed, please let me know. It's the more interaction I get, the better the podcast is for me as an experience. So I'm still loving it. I enjoy every second of this. I'm so grateful that I get to do this and that I still am chasing this dream, and that anybody listening right now, you are the reason. You're the only reason I get to do this is because you guys listen to it. So thank you from the bottom of my heart. Hope you enjoy the sunshine out there. Enjoy the summer. And yeah, let's fucking rock. Bye.